Yo, what's up guys? A new tier list. We're going to be looking at a normal elemental tier list. As mentioned before, I'm going to be doing this every January to redo all of the tier lists that are global tier lists. So this is not an RTA tier list, this is an overall usage of a tier list. Which therefore also does mean that we have a few criteria where we will rank these units on. Such as, is it usable early game, dungeons R5, siege offense, defense, arena offense, defense, RTA, and uniqueness / best in slot. However, I do give the mention, like last time around, some people did mention like, oh, it's very end game / RTA focused. Well, to be honest, in early game, a lot of stuff can work. You get through the early game with free-to-play units. You don't really need a specific net 5 to go through the early game or even through the dungeon. So for that reason, these factors have more value. Plus, there are some that are very unique or a best in slot, and therefore they still have higher value even if they're like super early game and that kind of stuff. Does also mean that any unit that is low placed does not mean it's necessarily bad. It's just more niche and you have to put more investment of like a whole team around it and anything like that to actually make it work. And of course, this list is completely based on my opinion and therefore you're very much free to disagree with this list. Once again, I'm going to go through all of the families. I will also include the free-to-play units such as a Katarina and the Ifrits and all of those kind of units. Because last time people did ask like, okay, I want to see how they rank compared to the other units. So we'll place them in as well. Timestamps will be by family, simple as that. I will include all the units up until the Demon Slayer collab. And as if you have seen before, I like to use the ranks of like 100, 95, 90, blah, blah, that kind of stuff. It's the same thing as like putting triple S, double S. The reason I like to do this mainly for the RTA tier list is that it gives me a chance to put a tier in between if I feel like, okay, units are better than the 95, but they're not really at 100. I can put a 97.5, whereas a double S.5 doesn't really work out that well. Let's actually look at some of the old tier lists. This is the tier list that I made last year. So with the tier list last year, I can right away see a few units being all the way at the bottom that are currently definitely buffed enough to be very usable, such as Alea, Byuncho, Sahad is in there. Chakra even, Irene is used nowadays, so there's definitely a lot of units at the bottom, if you look at this, that are definitely boosted a bit. I definitely have a few units all the way at the top, such as the Camilla, the Leo, that I definitely do expect to be high on that ranking once again. Once again, gonna go through all of these, once again, by family, and we're gonna go from oldest unit to newest unit, so for that reason, you can also kind of see in the timestamps where you would like to see the unit that you would like to look at. Or if you pulled a certain unit, maybe you can save this video and then look at it at a later time. It's like, oh, where did Sei place it? And where could he actually use it? Because with this, I will also recommend where to use them and what kind of build I recommend to put them on. So first of all, Camilla. Camilla is still incredibly strong for mainly siege offense, arena offense. It is usable as well. RTA, it is usable. It's not that much of a PvE / dungeon unit, but it is insanely good in this. And it's often a best in slot for those things as well. She's mostly built speed, HP on a Vio Nemesis build, mainly for siege offense. You could also go Vio Destroy. In that case, you probably want to go crit rate on the 4. In the case of RTA, most of the time you want to go for Violent and then some damage in there. Kind of depends how you build it, but she's very versatile. Main comp that she's been used in a lot is the Balayo Camilla and then some kind of tank for siege offense. You can actually do that for arena offense as well. RTA, she's really good paired with anything that would armor break for her because she has that S2 damage by enemy max HP that just does a lot of damage. Bit of HP on her is good, bit of attack is good on her. There's a lot of stats that are really good on her. And this is also one of those units. I will also mention the siege duplicates. She is worth to keep as siege duplicate. Vanessa is for sure one of the best, if not the best, for arena defense still. She's very good for RTA. Definitely not an early game unit. I think because of that, she's not as good as a Vanessa. In RTA, she's not really a best in slot. Arena defense, I could give the argument for her being a best in slot for arena defense. Thing on arena defense that a lot of people go very wrong with Vanessa is they try to go like, oh, I have to go Vile Will on it. No reason. Just go triple shield. Tanky as hell. You don't need the resistance. You don't need the speed. You don't need anything. Just triple shield sets or even enhanced sets or anything like that. That's the way to go. RTA, she has a bunch of builds. I kind of like her on the Swift Will tanky set, high accuracy, so she can land at S2 for a setup of an armor break. But besides that, it's mainly the tanky version. You don't really want to go for the crit rate version. If you go violent, you could go crit rate version. You could also add her in despair, but then I would also say kind of the tanky version. So in the RTA, few usages, but early game, worth nothing, so therefore a little bit less worth. In RTA, it might be a best in slot, but I would definitely say for arena defense, she is a best in slot. But she's, besides that, not used in too many other things, and she can definitely be replaced by other units as well, even for arena defense. Now we have Katarina, and Katarina used to be meta for R5, and pretty much just R5. You can use it in Siege offense, but haven't seen people use it in Siege offense at all. It's just built on this whatever high damage set. I've seen some people use it on a defense with a Pontus, but it's better in offense against, I guess, with defense with a Pontus. It's also not that great. But Katarina is not really one of those units that I would say new accounts should fuse. It's not really a must, so I'm going to place it just at a 55. Once again, sure, you can definitely make this unit work if you put a lot of effort into it, but it's definitely not something that I would recommend new beginner accounts to actually work on or anything. Then we have the Varad, and I think Varad is still incredibly strong, mainly for early game and then also TOA. So let's actually add TOA with this one. But is it necessarily best in slot? Well, not really. And the main reason because of that is there's a lot of units that do something similar to him. Pushbacks, freezes, a lot of stuff going on. And for that reason, Varad is kind of losing his spot where he's becoming like a real powerhouse where you like him a lot. Arena offense, he is actually usable in a team that is relatively common with a Varad, a Ritesh, a Leo, and a Annabelle. You make them all slow, you make them deal high damage, and for that reason it's pretty nice. Now let's actually one-up the Varad, because if you early game Varad is really nice to also clear TOA. It's definitely one of those things that helps out a lot. But then again, you also have the Tyrone nowadays and a few other units that kind of do the same thing as a Varad. Does also have a speed lead, so there's a bunch of things going on. But for Red, in the end, it is definitely a good unit. I'm going to give it a 90. I would say for best in slots, it's no longer really a best in slot that much. Also, RTA, it's not used as much. Most cases, he's kind of built like a Swift or a Vile build, and then just high defense, high accuracy, and something along those lines. Zyros is actually boosted a lot, and Zyros became incredibly strong. So early game Zyros will actually help you a lot. DOA early game Zyros will help you a lot. Like just the scenarios I'm talking then about, because the dungeons he's not going to do that much. Siege offense, a Galleon with a Tiana and a Zyros, once again, is very strong. Arena offense, probably one of the strongest right now. RTA, wouldn't use it, but he's definitely a unique best in slot where he has that increased cooltime, insane amount of damage. You don't need any crit rate on him anymore, so he's definitely one of those units. I would say for normal elementals, probably one of the highest damage dealers in a cleave offense kind of style there is. And for that reason, I'm going to give Zyros a 95, because also in early game, Zyros would just help you out a lot. Main build for him is that you want to go either Fatal or Rage. You want to have very high attack on him, and then high crit damage, a little bit of accuracy, and of course enough speed to be in tune. But that could be either on Fatal, Rage, a bunch of like Swift sets, like could be anything. I wanted to say Blade, but Blade is the only thing that's useless right now, because if you have high enough attack, you will always crit anyway. So that is the main thing. I think Zyros right now is really, really good. Then we have Chimera. Chimera is niche used in Siege offense. I think Chimera is really good in TOA, and that is it pretty much for Chimera. I haven't seen him too much in RTA nowadays. It is a little bit of a counter into a Veronica, but he's kind of all round where there's a bunch of places where it's really good, especially in TOA Hell. This is definitely one of those units that I always is my to-go-to unit for TOA Hell. So I'm going to give Chimera an 85. I think that's fair. Siege offense, the common Siege offense is the team with the Homunculus, Chimera, and then some kind of nuker, and then you can make your nuker move twice, once without attack buff, once with attack buff, and therefore you have that rotation in. Only thing is, I think that's currently only really strong if you do that with the, well, either a Water Series or an Ian, also known as the Steel Commander Light or the Light Ezio. That's pretty much the best slot for him. I would say with a Siri, it's also pretty decent, but with the Siri, like the Water Siri mainly, you can also just go for an Adriana setup, and that is probably better in the first place. So then the Chimera value has a little bit less value. So I'm gonna give it 85. It's a nice unit, but it definitely has its uses in like the very specific scenarios rather than can be spammed in a lot of things. Oh, I almost thought that we didn't have Lagmaron, but Lagmaron is over there. Well, next up, Tayor. And I think Tayor kind of fell off a little bit. Sure, late pick in RTA, maybe okay. Early game, maybe okay. Dungeons, you could put it in Dragons, but there's better options out there. Siege offense, haven't seen it in a while. Arena offense, haven't seen it in a while. So I think Tayor is, sure, it could be a nice and niche unit, but he kind of fell off where he's not super crazy itself. So Main build for him is just some kind of like speedy, high crit damage, don't need the crit rate, and then that's the kind of build you go for him in the first place. So that's just about a 70 right there. Rakan is slightly different, where Rakan is decent for arena defense. Haven't seen it too much on siege offense, defense. RTA, it's not great. TOA, not great. No, it's just actually like arena defense, which it's also kind of losing a spot where he does best in arena defense. I think the best arena defense for him is actually being a slow Rakan on violent high damage next to a Yeonhong. Or a Swift Rakan, and then it actually would outspeed a Tiana and its max accuracy, and therefore it can actually land on the Tiana that's 100 res with a Will Rune. Something like that is good for Rakan, but it's kind of on the point right now with the meta that it's not really that great for the arena defense. And anywhere else, I wouldn't really recommend to use a Rakan. That guy, too much, but yep. Lagmaron, however. Lagmaron is definitely usable for arena offense, siege offense. Mainly good siege offense with an Adriana. Well, arena offense could also go with an Adriana, but could also go with a kind of chilling setup. The main thing about a Lagmaron being better than a Theor is where Lagmaron has better base speed because he has the speed awakening. So for that reason, he's a lot more versatile and usable. And I would say that Lagmaron therefore has a little bit higher value. So I'm going to put him 80. Early game, he's definitely not too bad as well. You can also put this towards Giants. I don't think it is the worst. Well, actually, Theor can be put towards Giants as well. So I'm going to move them up one for both of them. Because early game, they do have some value as well. They're just not really that much of an RTA unit. Lagmaron, however, you could maybe put it in RTA if you put the good runes to it. But is he really worth it? Not really sure about it, but I think overall, like, they have a bunch of usages where you can use them. Build for Lagmaron is pretty much the same. Most of the time, swift, high crit damage, high attack, and that's your way to go. Then we go into some birds, and I do actually miss Sigmarus, I do notice right now. Well, actually, Sigmarus is one of those fusion units that I don't really recommend to build at the moment because it's just simply replaced by a lot of other units. So I will talk about it, I will just not place it. It's the simple thing. So first of all, Teshar. Teshar is the main best in slot for Giants, unless you have insanely good runes, and unless you have a Zareth. That is the main thing. So uniqueness and best in slot. It is really good for subjugation, time attack in the labyrinth stages. It is by far the best unit free to play, or not free to play, but early game to get, and then just clear all of your dungeons really fast with that. Mainly Giants, the other ones he's not that interesting actually, but yeah, he's just, I think for the uniqueness and for how good he is for early game, it's definitely a really high valued unit. However, I would say that towards more of the late game, there's a lot more replacements. You just could go for like a Julie for Giants, like he's not that much of a must, but I would say that he has a lot of value right now in where he can be used. Definitely not an RTA unit. Well, he could be a niche RTA unit, wouldn't really recommend it, but he could be used in there as well. But he's definitely really good for this part. And he has that much value in these two things, also the TOA, that I actually do give him a lot of credit for that. Sure, Siege Arena, wouldn't really recommend. I've seen him on Arena Defense as like a fast unit that can strip and stun. It's not the worst in it. It's like a 114 base, so it's definitely not bad. For the dungeon teams, it's mainly where you have to have the specific speed on it, that you can move twice, Konomiya boost it up again, and then just moving twice, and then just going for the whole shebang with that. And then for the exact stats, like most of the time, you just want to go 100 crit rate or as much crit rate as you need to be 100 crit rate in whatever you're doing, because he has like the lead himself for crit rate. And then you just want to go as much damage as possible with the right amount of speed that you need. Then Perna. Perna for siege defense is something you see very nichely, but that is pretty much about it. It's just some here and there siege defense. You could say it in lower end of siege offense where you like to bruise her a little bit more, it could be okay-ish. But RTA and anywhere else, you're not really going to see that. So I would say it is a little bit up from a Rakan, because Rakan is just the arena defense. I would say that a Perna is a little bit more versatile, but it's mainly more early game than late game. Sigmarus, I don't have placed in here, but I will place Sigmarus probably on the 55, because I wouldn't waste any investments at skilling up a Sigmarus. Sure, early game, you could go for it, but there's a lot of better options to go for rather than going for a Sigmarus, because in the end, Sigmarus is just not going to add that much to your whole core. There's just other units out there that will do more than him. Ariel is a good unit for siege offense, and you could use it in arena defense, and that is pretty much it. So siege offense, it is a nice tank. Like if you need a water tank, just make it full tanky, bunch of nemesis runes, Vionem, high resistance, something along those lines. Often used, you could use it, for example, with the Balai or Camilla team. You could use it with anything that you just have. Like on the enemy side, you have like a Savannah or any unit that will hard focus a water unit. It's definitely good for that. Defense-wise, I've seen it before with like Ariel and then a bunch of Camillas. It's not the best defense out there, but the only really good way to clear that is either Bombers or clearing it with a Sonya Fast. So it does have some niche usage. So I'm going to give that a 65. It's definitely not a unit I use all too much. Then we have Valkyrja, and Valkyrja is actually RTA only, but it is pretty much a best-in-slot for RTA. And sure, early game or dungeons or even siege offense. Siege offense, you can actually use it next to a Feng Yang and then an Alaya. It is usable that way. It's definitely not a bad defense because you can make the unit do a lot of damage by just putting crit rate on the slot 4. And then, let's say, defense, crit rate, defense, or speed, crit rate, defense, speed, crit damage, defense, via wills, mostly the kind of builds that you would like to go for it. But I would say that he's insanely good in RTA. Arena offense, defense wouldn't use it. Siege offense is usable. I don't use it that much, but it's really one of those best in slots for RTA. If you don't have this unit in RTA right now, it's definitely one of those things that makes your RTA a little bit more difficult. But since the versatility isn't really there, he takes a little bit less points. But if you care a lot by RTA, he definitely goes up a few ranks. Then we have the Eladriel. Sometimes used in RTA to hard counter things. It is sometimes used on siege defense. Haven't seen it on arena defense that much. Haven't seen it that much on a siege offense, arena offense, not that much. It's a reviver. It's okay. He's also good in the labyrinth stage. We didn't actually notice labyrinth in here, but he's kind of okay in there. Does have some usage. No, actually, there's another siege offense where he's good. So he's good in siege defense, where you could go for like a Carcano with a Miles and then an Eladriel. That's relatively a common defense. I would say Terranese is a little bit taking over his spot on arena defense, but in arena siege defense. But in siege offense, you have that common team with an Eladriel and then a Diana or Athena, and then you have like a Triana in the third slot. And that is good against like these Odin teams where you just like survive and then you could potentially revive and then you just clear from there. So it's definitely an okay-ish one for that, but definitely also not the greatest. So I'm going to give it a 70. He has his niche usage here and there. Then we have Praha, and I think Praha is not necessarily bad, but Praha is really not used that much because she needs too much of a rune investment to shine in RTA. And I would say that she's only good for RTA nowadays. That's just pretty much it. Sure, you could make like a niche siege offense. Let's say Theo Mars with a Miles and then a Praha. It's a fine siege offense. It is very bruiser heavy. A lot of things could go wrong. Therefore, I wouldn't really classify it as good. But it is definitely something that you could use it on. Like it has a speed buff. You can utilize that speed buff on a bunch of units. And then you could work your way around with that. But I would say it's just siege offense and a little bit of RTA. But for RTA, she needs a value set that's faster than all of your units. And she's not really worth it at the moment. So I'm just going to put it at a 65 over there. If you put good investment into her, she's definitely usable. But if you don't, she's not that great. Juno, however. Juno is... Actually, I'm going to put Juno at 100. And sure, early game dungeons, she's not going to worth anything. But she is... that much of a unique and best in slot for a lot of things. She's incredibly good in siege offense. Let's say on the enemy side, there's a lot of like heavy debuffers and those kind of things. Juno's great. Juno with a Leo plus something to... you could even go like Juno, Leo, Pheromos or something. Or Pheromos... Well, no, I think I would kind of recommend to have a second healer next to it. But this is definitely a unit you could keep for a siege dupe as well. It is absolutely an insane unit for RTA and arena defense because the dot meta is still really dominant. If you don't counter the dot meta in arena defense, your defense is going to be shit. And Juno is actually one of the two options which are most accessible and one of the best. The other is probably Pheromos. Depending how you run it, Pheromos might be better or worse. But in a lot of cases, I do think that Juno probably does do better. For arena defense, it's really nice to put speed increasing artifacts on her, because the moment, let's say, a Galleon moves, gives her the speed buff, but since she has speed increasing effect, her 30% speed buff is not 30%, but let's say 45%. Juno cuts, and then she strips all of the attack buffs, and she lands like a Despair stun. Super nice for that. For RTA, common build is just a speed, crit rate, HP, Despair, Revenge, Despair, Nemesis, whatever. Vampire, niche kind of scenario as well. And you could also, of course, go for, if you go for the Siege offense, where you want to use it in the sense of a Leo, then you make it really slow, and then you make it tanky, and you work your way around with that. For defense, you could go crit rate on the 4, but you could also just simply go HP on the 4. Might you say, like, this is very RTA focused or very, like, endgame PvP focused? Yes, she is definitely a PvP late game focused. Early game, she's not going to do anything for you. But since she's that unique and a best in slot in multiple scenarios, I'm going to give her 100, because I do think she's incredibly strong and definitely a unit you need in your RTA box. Without her, RTA becomes a lot more difficult. Next up, we have Ciara. Well, she definitely has her uniqueness because she's the easiest way to blow up bombs. There's a few other niche units that can also kind of do it, but it's not really that great. Definitely, I'm also one of those units, early game PvE, blah, blah, blah. Not that much value, but then again, you're only going to play PvE for like an X amount of time, and then you're going to transition into late game. Siege offense usable, arena offense usable, siege defense usable, arena defense wouldn't recommend it, RTA usable, so overall very versatile unit. Nowadays, you don't really want to put it on the crit rate with the additional damage artifacts like we did in the past. You actually want to go for high attack and then bomb damage artifacts, and then just make the bomb damage do as much damage. She's also hard countered by a Camilla. To counter the Camilla in their own sense, it is possible to put 15 crit rate on the Ciara on defense, and then just put very high bomb damage that you can actually snipe out a Camilla that is trying to counter you in its sense. So I would say Ciara also having in the speed lead, very versatile, very good. And she's in RTA also still really good, but it's more of a unit that you have to have a whole team around to make her good, rather than Juno that could be is like, okay, it doesn't matter what I draft, but if the enemy drafts X, I draft Juno, I'm good. So that's kind of the thing with a Ciara being slightly worse than a Juno in that sense. Moving on next to the Occult girls, I would say in NFL early game, getting through like your early game stage, NFL makes that a lot easy. Siege offense, you do see it from time to time if you do need a bit of sustain and then some armor breaks. It's definitely a nice setup for there. I would say for arena offense, the team that I mentioned earlier with the Varad, Ritash, and a Leo, it's definitely really good because it has the armor break and heal in one, which helps out a bit. Plus it's AoE and it's a very high effective rate of actually landing that armor break. RTA, it is usable, but it's also really not mostly like the best option out there. So I would say that NFL has a lot of usages, but she's never really a best in slot or being most unique in like exactly what she does. She's very versatile, very good, but there's often a unit that kind of could replace her, or you actually have to invest a lot of good stuff in her to actually make it work or build the whole team around it. But she has a lot of usages where she can be pretty good. Now, I'm actually going to put her 85 because I think she is pretty nice. Wouldn't put her anywhere on defense, though. It's mainly the arena offense, siege offense, and RTA for her. And I would say early game PvE, she's not that bad in like a TOA. She's not that bad in like early game scenarios and those kind of things. Dungeons, however, probably wouldn't really pick her there. Then we have Rika, and Rika is incredibly good in TOA. Siege offense, really good. Main team I like her in is something along the lines of a Hagang plus a Lewis or a Riley, so you have a lot of protection, and then she's the sole damage dealer. Arena offense, I mentioned it before, dot team is incredibly good. Best dot team out there is probably something Rika, Nora, Hagang, and then like a Sath or like a Trix or anything like that. She's incredibly good at that. RTA late pick often doesn't fit, but the moment she does fit, she's incredibly good. Early game also really good. So yeah, I'm actually going to put Rika at 100. Or am I going to put her 95 because her uniqueness is not really there? There's a few other units that can kind of do her same thing. No, I think she's still like, maybe her uniqueness is not really there, but her best in slot is kind of still there. And for that reason, I would say Rika still gets 100 because she's actually good at all of the scenarios. She's not used as much. Well, actually, siege offense, I think I use Rika every siege. Every other siege, I use Rika for sure. Arena offense, if I want to go for dot team, she's always used. So yeah, Rika gets 100 for me for sure. Build for her is mostly Despair Will And then you want to go, if you go for the arena offense, you want to go 15 crit rate so you don't crit on Camillas. Otherwise, you don't care that much about it, but you go 100 resistance and then a bunch of accuracy. The more accuracy, the better. That's mainly about it. I did miss the build on the NFL. Most of the time, you want to go 100 resistance, decent amount of accuracy, high HP, high attack, and high speed. Most likely Vio Nem, Vio Will. We have Charlotte, and Charlotte, I would say, is good early game, good in TOA. Siege offense, arena offense, haven't seen it in ages. RTA, haven't seen that as much as well, so it's mainly just an early game unit. Kind of niche in there. It's definitely not that bad. If you have a very specific RTA team that you want to boost something up and you make a Swift Charlotte, sure, can make that work. It is okay, but it's not necessarily really great or anything. So I would say a little bit too much early game focus, and after that kind of loses her shine of where she is like a good to pick unit and worth to invest unit in. Build for Vio or Despair, and then you just want high speed. The damage comes from the additional damage artifacts by speed, HP, and attack, and something along those lines. Moving on next with Beth. Beth is actually one of the really good units in an RTA team with the Layla Tomoe Hey Gang comp, where she has the remove beneficial effect block kind of thingy, and she has decent damage and armor break and absorbs or lowering, one of the two, but she's okay-ish in that, but that team is that niche that I would say it's not insanely good, and she's just a 5th pick in that team, so she's not even a core one in that team. Sure, TOA and everything, she's kind of nice as well, so she has her usages, but she's not really like one of the craziest units out there. Siege offense, defense, haven't really seen her too much. You could probably siege offense with her, wouldn't be that bad, but it's not really that great. So she has a bit of usages everywhere, but it's not like insanely good, except for the RTA team with the Layla Tomoe Hey Gang comp. Then I would definitely have her as an option for a 5th pick. Most of the time, she's built on either Despair, high accuracy, or on Swift, and then high accuracy. And you definitely want to go Will on her for those RTA kind of styles. Rocky is that unit that you're hoping to counter certain things as a Julian, but most of the time doesn't really perform to it. I would say it has its niche usages, like killing that one unit with that skill 3. It can do a good amount of damage. It still has the Shatter S2, which is the better S2 between the two from the family on the S2s. Because it has the cycling, it has the armor break, so there's a bunch of niche stuff going in there. Can definitely see being used in a Bruiser RTA or a Bruiser Siege match as well. But it's a little bit used, a little bit everywhere, but also, once again, not really a best in slot for anything. Most common build for her is probably also Swift, Despair, or Vio. You do want to get that 100 crit rate in, and then you want to also deal like decent amount of damage while still being surviving. So she needs a good amount of stats to actually make her work. Then we have the Athna, and Athna is definitely more of a late game unit, but very good at it. RTA, I would say it's RTA-wise speed contester, probably one of the better units that can speed contest. She does need a really good rune investment though. She needs speed, crit rate, attack on a Swift set, and then being incredibly high on the attack to still make sure that their skill 3 would deal enough damage that the enemy is under 50% HP and therefore have the guaranteed stun. But you also have the cycling of the skill 2, which gives you that 120% attack bar. So she's incredibly good, but I would say she's incredibly good if you have the good runes. Without the good runes, she's not going to do as much. I would say early game TOA, if you do give her that 100 crit rate set, she is an okay armor breaker that can actually do some TOA stuff as well. But early game TOA, it's not the greatest. Siege offense, I did mention one before. Siege offense, common siege offense was the Eladriel with a Athna and then a Triana. And then you kind of want to make everything tanky, protect the Athna. Athna can do damage by itself. In that case, you want to go for Violent Athna. For RTA, you can also go for Violent Athna. It's definitely not bad. Let's say you go for skill 2, you go for skill 3, then you take an additional turn, you already got your skill 2 pretty much back. So you can do a lot of cycling on a additional turn that way. And for her, it's very important to have good artifacts by speed, attack, and HP. Mainly by speed and attack if she's fast and high attack, because that adds in most damage for her. And she's a really good setup unit for a lot of other things. So early game, not that interesting. Late game, Athna insanely strong. Next up, some Dragonites. We have Chao, and Chao is a unique best in slot in one thing, which is the Labyrinth Krodos dungeon. It's really good in that. It's the only place that I actually use my Chao. Sure, you can place it in RTA, but as you've seen in the last year on my channel, I like to hate on Chao. Chao never really performs that one, mostly sucks. However, I do have to give it some credit for Siege offense. You can use it in Siege offense with the Camilla and Belial. And that's just like another way of like a little bit of chip damage. But most of the time, when you can actually pick a Chow, you could have placed anything in that third slot. So it is only good for the Kodos dungeon in Labyrinth because you can solo the boss. But besides that, a little bit of niche RTA here and there, and that's about how good a Chow is. Leica, I also don't like too much. Like I would say some RTA matches here and there, but it's getting more and more niche because if you stun a Leica, you would mess with him. If you have multi-hits, which a lot of units do nowadays, you mess with the Leica. If the Leica doesn't counter, it's not that great. And yeah, like I would say, he's only good in like the Wind Rift Beast for PvE kind of stuff. So not really the biggest fan of Leica. It's definitely one of those units that could definitely disappoint you if you were to go for it. Also for builds, if you use the Chow in the PvE stuff in Kodos, it's just whatever damage set. Otherwise, Vio speed, crit damage, HP. But you do want to have decent attack substats on him. Like in most cases, just Vampire, 100 crit rate. Then we have Leo. And Leo I'm going to place on 100 just by uniqueness and best in slot. And that's just pretty much that. Early game, he's not going to do anything for you. Early game, he's definitely not usable, except for this one TOA stage where you have the TOA speed, or not the TOA stage, the Labyrinth stage where you have like speed down thing. With Leo, everything has the same speed. And then you go for a bunch of like thirds and like team-ups and blah, blah, blah. Very simple in there. So it's absolutely a best in slot in there. But it's often a best in slot for Siege offense, often a best in slot for Arena offense, and it's a really good late pick for RTA. So definitely Leo has high value for that. Also, your auto offense for Arena, which is the most chill way to do your Arena, is always based on Leo. It's just like, oh, these things have like 300 speed. Cool, now they have 0. Cool, let's bruiser it out. Simple as that. So that common team is like Leo, Feng Yang, Alaya. It's really good. There's just a bunch of ways that you can just make a bruiser very simple. For Siege and Arena, that way I like it on Violent and Destroy. So it does have a little bit of chance to still do chip damage in case something dies or just get the Destroy in. I like to go for HP, crit rate HP with a little bit of attack in there. And then just making tanky enough that he can pack a punch. For RTA, however, I like him on Violent Nemesis. And then I like to go attack, crit damage, attack. You can go also tankier on him. So you go for like HP, crit damage, attack, or HP, attack, crit damage, or something along those lines. But I like Leo to be a little bit dangerous, especially with the Nemesis set. The Nemesis set makes it where if someone accidentally hits Leo and gets him in the Torrent range, Leo can do a lot of damage. So Leo for me is definitely 100 right there. Moving on next to Shiho. And Shiho has uniqueness, but not in a positive way. This unit probably received most amount of buffs while still not being meta and being shit. This thing has been buffed so many times, and he's still garbage. So I would say he's only usable in RTA, but he's garbage for RTA. So I would even, like, he's okay-ish with a Shizuka comp, and then everyone has, like, the invisibility, blah, 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 and then you're fighting a Juno, and Juno already screws you up, and even though you're wrong element, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So if you put a lot of good runes to him, I think you can probably make him work, but it's definitely not something that I would say is worth the good runes, because you got a lot of really strong wind units out there right now. Cigar is super dominant. Athna eats the monkey for breakfast, dinner, and lunch. So yeah, there's just a bunch of like wind units that will screw you up really badly that you don't want to use this thing in. So or the Water Monkey, good enough for a bunch of late game stuff if you put enough good rune quality to him, but most of the time not really worth it. Fire Monkey, however, insanely good in RTA. Siege offense, there's a few as well. It's mainly against Celia. So if there's something that's like, oh, I'm gonna get stunned, Fire Monkey can do a decent bruiser way out there as well. So I would say Fire Monkey, it's mainly RTA focused. A little bit Siege offense, but it's mainly RTA focused. But he's incredibly good at that. I would say, no, actually, he kind of... Veligil's really core meta. Fire Monkey fell down a little bit of meta by just meta shifting a little bit. So I'm just going to lower him down, but still RTA main thing. Thing is, you want to go speed, crit damage, HP. You want to have 100 crit rate on him. And then you want to go Violent and Nemesis, Violent Revenge, or Violent Will. You could go Violent Blade as well if you need the extra stats. But 100 crit rate is very important, and you want to go very high HP, defense, and speed. Speed is a little bit lower, it's fine, just in the 120, 130, 150 range. But if you go low attack, his attack comes from his passive. So you can go very low attack, and then the crit rate, crit damage that you put on him, make him still do a lot of damage. And this thing can definitely make you win even against like water units and that kind of stuff. He's pretty crazy in RTA if you invest the good runes to him. Another unit that has been picked up for, that we see a lot more recently as well, is Xingzi, which is a very good bruiser for RTA as well. I would say for siege offense, I've seen some people use it in siege offense as well. It's mainly based on a Xingzi with a Camilla and then some tanky unit next to it, let's say an Alaya or Riley, and then you use it just as like a bruiser offense. Everything is kind of tanky, everything is kind of on destroy, everything is doing a little bit of chip damage. They can't really kill you, and therefore you kill the enemy. So Xingzi is really good in that, so I give him 1 up over the Fire Monkey. Plus in RTA right now, he's really annoying. He has the chance right now, if he counters, to also get a strip and stun. So with the strip and stun into a Oliver, into a Miles, or into like anything that AoEs a lot, even an Ethna, can definitely be a very annoying unit. For RTA, recommend the build of speed, crit rate, HP, violent, revenge. So the moment that they start focusing the monkey first, which is very common, he can still revenge. Doesn't have to strip on that, but at least he can still revenge and give a stun, so he can be a little bit annoying that way. For siege, I would more say like a speed, crit rate, HP, or attack, and then you want to go for some destroy on him as well, so violent destroy. Next up, we have the Beast Monks, which actually all of them have received a decent buff. Chandra most of all, and I think Chandra's actually pretty insane right now. Siege defense is definitely where you see Chandra shine a lot right now. Siege defense, there's a lot of options out there. He is actually a niche unit that you could put on Swift because he has the boost on the skill 3. So that's something that not often people expect. So let's say you go for Chandra with a Fae and then a Reviver such as an Eladriel or something like that. He can actually boost up the Fae to make it move and then do something. But there's a lot of Chandra defenses out there nowadays. But you can also use Chandra in offense for that reason. So let's say you go Chandra and then you boost up a other unit. So let's say the Chandra moves and then you boost up a nuker such as a Carbine or... no, not Carbine. Is it called Carbine? Covenant. So you can snipe something, or Federica and you snipe something. You can also give the Federica the hug that the skill 2 does a little bit more damage. So there's a lot of options there. Plus RTA, he's a really good first pick in RTA as well. Then again, early game PvE is not going to do anything for you. But he's definitely pretty unique in the sense where his skill 1 always crits. So he also doesn't give a shit about like wrong elements. So definitely a unit that's very strong at the moment, and definitely a unit you would like to pick up at the moment. Then we have Kumar, and Kumar I see sometimes in siege offense, mostly on siege defense, but when it's on siege defense, it's mainly Sylvia based. And if you don't have a Sylvia, I would say that Kumar's not going to do that much for you, and therefore he loses a bit of interest. Also, I would say anywhere else in the game, he's not as usable, so it's mainly just siege defense in these niche scenarios. Also, the build for the Chandra, I would say most of the time speed, crit damage, HP, low crit rate because you don't need any of that. Could be violent if you want to go high damage on him. Despair if you want to go a little bit less damage on him, but more chance of like just CCing. I would say that I like the violent build the most, but you have to go like heavy on damage on him and just make him pretty fast. But you, as mentioned, you could also make him swift. Kumar, in most cases, you do want to go crit damage on the 4, HP on the 6, and then I would say either Vile Revenge or Vile Will for him on defense. Ritesh, I would say Ritesh is sometimes used in siege offense. Only way that I can actually see Ritesh being usable is Ritesh being used with the Annabelle, Varad, and Leo in arena offense. That is somewhat okayish. Besides that, you don't see all too much Ritesh. But he has a little bit more versatility where you can use him at a bunch of places, early game and that kind of stuff. It can help you out a little bit as well. Probably also just want to go like... I think in this case, you just want to go speed, HP, and then you're just focusing on like surviving and landing the skill 3 because that has the armor break and the defense buff. So there's some niche mechanics that you can do with the Ritesh that way. Then next up we have a Wusa. And Wusa Siege Offense, you don't see that team as much anymore with a Wusa Rika Geni. And that way you can just like push back, Rika can kill things. There's not too many strips on the enemy side, therefore you can use the Wusa. You have the protection over there, it's pretty good. So Siege Offense, usable. RTA, definitely usable. It's not really the best in it anymore, but it has some usages in there. So I would give Wusa a 85. You could put it on Swift, you could put it on HP, or not on HP, but, well, HP anyhow. But you could put it on Swift, you could put it on Violent, and Speed HP is most likely the way to go. So the skill 2 does the most amount of damage, and your shield have the most amount of value as well. Then we go for Chiwu, which is arguably still one of the better strippers in game because it also has the speed lead and it is a pretty good counter into a Camilla. Because let's say you use a arena offense of a Chiwu, Asher, Galleon plus damage dealer. Let's say you kill everything except for the Camilla. The Camilla starts focusing the Chiwu and therefore your other units can kill the Camilla. So it's definitely really good for that. RTA has some niche usage here and there as well. Arena defense, siege defense wouldn't really use it too much, but I would mainly say for arena offense, Chiwu is pretty good. It's not necessarily really best in slot, but there's a lot of options that you can do with a Chiwu, which you can't always do with a Tiana, which is the most favorable arena stripper for most cases. But there's definitely some usage to it, and also, as a late pick in RTA, it can actually be a pretty annoying good unit as well. So I'm kind of one down it, but Chiwu is definitely still a decent unit. Most of the time you want to build it on either Swift or Despair. You can also build it on high speed for like the high damage, because his skill 3 is damage scaling. His skill 2 is also a guaranteed crit nowadays. I'm not sure if there was a condition for that, but he does crit more on that, so crit damage 4 or a crit rate 4 is definitely nice on the Chiwu. Pungbeak. I would say Pungbeak is mainly just arena offense, but most of the arena offense with Pungbeak are kind of niche rather than insanely good. So high damage build on the Pungbeak, but is it really necessarily something too interesting? I kind of doubt it. So I'm going to give that just a 60. I don't really like Pungbeak, especially because you have like a Zyros right now, which is just so much better. And you have like a few way better units out there right now, that I feel like the only place where Pungbeak would be good is actually not that great. So yeah, I will give it a 65. He is usable, it's just not that great. Then some of the free-to-play units, a Theomars, arena defense, nah, siege defense mostly, siege offense, usable, RTA, not used as much. I would say it's not really the meta where you see Theomars that much on defense, so also he's hard counted by a Leo, because Leo makes his speed scaling on the skill 1 and the skill 2 a lot lower, so Leo, Alaya, Feng Yang, which is super common offense, kind of make him struggle in the first place. So Theomars gets about a 70 for me. Tessarion is definitely something that you see a lot more on siege defense. You also see it in RTA, but in RTA it's always struggling to counter the passive, and passives are mostly one of the strongest things in game, and therefore he doesn't do that well. But he has the buff that if he lands 1 Oblivion, the next time he hits it, it becomes a 3-turn Oblivion, which is pretty hard to shake off if you don't cleanse it off. And arena defense, most of the time, he's kind of the way that you would say, like, okay, my team is super hard count by Leo. If I'm smacking a Theomars in the 3rd slot, then at least they cannot Leo me. So kind of has usage for that. I'm going to give that an 80 for that reason, because he's trying to do things that you think he's very good at, but most of the time he's not that great at it. That's the biggest issue. Then we have Akamamir, which was an okay unit for dungeon teams, where you go for the Akamamir in combination with a Julie, and therefore you clear the wave, blah, blah, blah kind of stuff. He is okay-ish for that, but he's also kind of on the point where I would say, like, yeah, there's better options to do that regardless. Sure, he's pretty good in TOA, especially the TOA later stages. His skill 2 does do a good amount of damage. I would say I'll give him a little bit of niche value where he can be used, but you have to build like a very much team around him to make him good. Plus, the big issue for him is he's wind. If he was light or dark, he would have been a really good nuker on that skill 3 next to a unit that provides death break and a bunch of other debuffs. But since he is wind and there's often a finesse on defense or other fire units on defense, he's not that great. So, gonna give Akamamir 65 in current state. Then we go for Alicia, which is pretty much just arena offense, nothing else than arena offense. I would say prior to the Zyros buff, she was insanely good for certain things. Also killing Björnchills if there's no buffs on the enemy side. She has the guaranteed crit, which is really nice. But since the Zyros came with the buff recently, the value of the Alicia went down by a substantial amount, where I would say, like, okay, she's just good for arena offense, but she's not really a best in slot for arena offense anymore. But still, I would say she is definitely a really good option for arena offense. That skill 3 into a skill 2 is definitely a kill for a lot of options, but it's just arena offense. Anything else, wouldn't use it. Siege offense, most likely wouldn't use it. No, I would say just the 70, because it's kind of good in one thing, but not best in slot. And then everything else, she's kind of weak. So if you were to say, like, oh, should I invest like Devilmons and stuff in her? Not really, probably. And then we have Brenya. And Brenya's incredibly good for a lot of dungeons. Most likely best in, or 100% best in slot for SF. Arguably really good unit to best in slot. Well, not necessarily best in slot, but a really good unit for PC as well. absolute best in slot for R5. Also really good in like the Wind Rift. It's really good in all of those kind of PvE things. Wouldn't use it anywhere else than just PvE. But since she's that much of a best in slot in a bunch of dungeons, sure, there's replacements, but she's absolutely a best in slot for what she does. I give her a pretty high value of an 85 on that. Do I feel like 85 is fair for just a PvE unit? No, I'm going to put it 80 because she does have the replacement by just a crow or something like that. But you need a lot higher rune requirements to make it work on a crow. But since she's just PvE and you could do it with another unit, I'll give that an 80. Then we go Tiana, and I think Tiana is fair to go all the way to the top. Very often, best in slot for arena offense. Very often, best in slot for siege offense. And I know I did these the other way around, but I don't give a shit. So yeah, it's very good for those two. I'm actually going to one down it a little bit. Because RTA, not used as much nowadays. PV, not used at all. But since she's that much of a best in slot for the both of them over here, I'm going to give them value for that. And especially nowadays where you also have like options for a Truffle or a Dark Tanjiro or anything like that with a Nephthys or a Maximilian or any armor breaker that way. Asima. There's just a lot of options where in Siege, she's pretty much a guaranteed win as long as you outspeed. Arena offense, it's also the least RNG factor of stripping there is in the game. That's just super unique by that factor. So she gets a 95 for that reason. Then we have the Poseidon, which I would say Poseidon is nice early game, nice in Dragons early, TOA nice. Siege offense still usable with like Tiana, Galleon, Poseidon, which is not too bad. Nowadays with the Dark Tanjiro also an option. Arena offense, it's pretty nice as well for the sake of going for a Chiwu, Asher, Galleon, Poseidon. So it definitely has a lot of usages. RTA also usable, so Poseidon is not necessarily anywhere best in slot, but anything that's listed here except for R5, you can use it in. So I'm going to give him a lot of credits for that. I'm going to put him on 90 for that reason. It's not necessarily really a best in slot for any of those, but it's a really good unit for a little bit of everything. Okeanos. Okeanos is just RTA, but he's also kind of still on the struggling part, like finding his spot in RTA. Is he actually good at it or not? If you invest really good runes in him, he's definitely a high value in RTA, but without that, he's not that great. Anywhere else wouldn't really use him that much. Oh, I also forgot to go for the bolts for a few of the last units. Oops. Bolts in the Poseidon, I would definitely go for the full-on damage. It is speed scaling, so I do recommend to go high crit rate, high crit damage, and then high speed on it. You can go high accuracy to also land the pushbacks. Tiana's just full speed, but keep in mind her skill 2 does do a lot of damage, so skill 2 crit damage helps you out a lot. Briandia, full damage. Okeanos, most cases you want to go via will, and then additional damage by speed is the source of your damage, and you want to go max accuracy of 85 on that. Then we go Triton, and Triton is, I would say, currently a best in slot, well, a second best in slot, or second to best in slot for a arena defense, and that is Vanessa Triton +2. That's the main common thing you see in Europe right now, and I would say Europe is probably the higher meta for arena defense because it's the most active defense, or the most active rush in the first place. Only thing that's better is Allura, which is an LD5. So for that reason, I think Triton has a lot of value in arena defense. Anywhere else, you're really not going to use it that much. So I would give Triton a fair 80 of being really good in one thing, but not that great in the rest. Arena offense, you could actually use Triton as well because it is the fastest stripper out there. So you could go 33 lead, Triton, and then the other two units have to go for the kill. So that could be, I used in the past like Amber plus Ganymede or something. And then just with the Ganymede and Amber, you just like push down and then you kill it a multiple, or like you hit it multiple times and therefore you make it work. You could also go for like some kind of armor breaker, such as Truffle, Dark Tanjiro, and then a follow-up unit, or Galleon and a follow-up unit. There's a bunch of options you could go for offense as well, but it is a little bit more tricky, especially into fire units. If there is like a finesse on defense or a fast Rakan on defense, mainly like the issue of the fast fire units if you don't push those back. Most of the time, you want to put it on Swift and you want to put it on Will. If you put it on Will, Leo cannot push you back on the first hit. You could also put it 100 rest, so Leo thinks he can hit it, but then he still cannot in most cases. So that's definitely an option for the Triton. I think I'm going to one-up him to 85 because he's that incredibly good for defense, and there are options for arena offense as well. Bastet, however, is definitely a unit you don't see all too much. You could still use it in Siege offense, Arena offense, RTA maybe, but you definitely don't see that much. Most of the time, just a speedy unit, and that's all you care about her. Then we have Sekhmet, which goes for mainly RTA. You can use it in Arena defense, because if you put it fast on Swift in defense, Leo cannot push it back that easily. She could reset either a Tiana or a Lucian on the enemy side, and therefore you could kind of get your win in there because she has a high base speed. But is it really that good in current meta? I wouldn't necessarily say so. Besides that, it's just an RTA unit. She is definitely high value in RTA. Most of the time, just Swift, high additional damage artifacts, but that's it. PvE-wise, wouldn't really recommend it that much. Also for RTA, she's kind of trying, but she's also not doing an insane well job. So I give an 80 to Sekhmet for that reason. Hathor, I would say, is just good in some very niche TOA hell stages, but that is about it. That's legit about it, and she's not really worth the Devimons for that. And I'm happy to see Hathor all the way down at a 60. I'm totally fine with that. Maybe even a 55, like I barely have used that unit ever. Then we have Samath, which is definitely good for Arena defense, Arena offense. Siege offense, there's a few if you go for the team that just takes, like if the enemy doesn't have any form of sustain and you go for 3 units that have a second life, let's say an Ayunu, a Samath, and a Perna, you can definitely fight your way around that with a Siege offense, and it's mainly used against teams that are squishy but have no form of sustaining. RTA niche use here and there, so it's definitely a unit that's used a little bit all over the place. It's also never really best in slot that much, because I think a Vanessa in most cases is better on Arena defense than a Samath. However, if you want a 33 lead on offense, Samath is probably your best option. So I would say I'll give that an 85 for Samath. Most of the time, you do want to build this unit on a Despair set, or you want to just go for like a full damage set in the first place. Daphnis, first place, coin flip unit, just for RTA, wouldn't really use it anywhere else. Most of the time, it's either double Nem Will, but there's better options for double Nem Will units, such as a Federica, because it just simply does a lot more damage and has that protection against death. So I would say, and this you also have to land the Death Break. If you don't land the Death Break, there's no damage. You have to land the Death Break and you have to crit. So yeah, I don't really like the unit that much, the Daphnis. He could be scary, but most of the times he's not as scary as he looks like. Ganymede, however, is absolutely a best in slot for TOA Hell. Very good for TOA Hard as well. RTA, we don't see too much. Siege offense, we don't see too much. Arena offense, we don't see too much. But all of the things that I just mentioned, he could be used in. So it's definitely one of those units that is still really good. It's just not used as much because we have other units kind of taking over his role, so his uniqueness goes down. But since he's good in so many things, I definitely do think he still has a lot of value in there. And there's definitely a bunch of semi-unique builds you could do with him, but just resetting an Ember multiple times. There's definitely a bunch of things out there. I showed it with the Dark Tanjiro. Let's say you go for Ganymede, Tiana, Dark Tanjiro, and Ember. You need pretty much no damage sets, and because of the Ganymede, it makes it so safe. You can push back, you can reset, you can ventilate, Amber goes twice. There's definitely a lot of usages for it, it's just that we don't see it as much anymore these days. But I do think that the Ganymede is still very strong. Most of the time, you just want to build it on Violent with Will, and you just want to make it fast. The other stats don't matter too much as long as you have decent accuracy. Okay, next up the Pandas, but I did notice that I missed a few more units, which are a bunch of free-to-play units, so I added those in later, which also means that I can put in the Sigmarus. Sigmarus, I think there's better options out there, and it wouldn't really waste resources into the Sigmarus, so I would say Sigmarus is probably just 65. It's just early game PvE kind of related stuff, and you just want to put a damage set on it high on crit damage because it has the scaling max HP on the enemy, but it's never that interesting. However, let's look at the Panda. So let's start off with the Fire Panda first. Fire Panda is incredibly good in R5. Early game, absolutely a best in slot for that. I would say dungeons, mainly early game, such as Necro, but also Steel Fortress and PC. It is absolutely really great in that, but this is really an early game shining unit, and late game you're probably never going to use it as much. Siege offense, also really good. Arena offense. If you go for slow team, but you don't have a Feng Yang, Xiongfei is kind of an option. RTA, you're not going to see it, but I would say Fire Panda has a lot of value by mainly being good early game that much. It's a lot of early game stuff, but afterwards, late game, he falls off, so But it's early game, definitely worth to build a strong Fae. Most of the time, you just want to build it high on defense with like violent something, violent revenge for a lot of those PvE stages. And then some decent accuracy to make it land these skills. And then you want to go just triple defense. That's the easiest way, or speed defense, defense. Molong we see a little bit in RTA. We don't see it in Arena offense. We don't see it in Siege offense. And also in RTA, we don't see it as much. So Molong, I'll give it a 75. I do think with the Zenitsus, where Molong skill 3, 70% HP, and then the Zenitsu skill 3, or skill 4 will go for the clear. Definitely do think we're going to see a little bit more mechanics that way. But Molong, I would give it a 75 right now. It's a little bit of everything, but not really doing a great job at any of those. Most of the time, Swift, Fio, or Vampire, and Speed HP, or even triple HP. Feng Yang, however, the Unfair Bear, insanely good for absolute best in slot for Arena offense, especially into serve guild battle with a Leo, Alaya, and then a Tetra or a Veramos or a Seimei, whatever kind of support unit you want to have. Feng Yang is absolutely great in there. Siege offense, once again, Feng Yang with Alaya as the best in slot, but you could also go Feng Yang plus a Valajul and then something else that does something else. So there's a lot of options that you could go for Feng Yang even if you don't have a Leo or an Alaya. But it's absolutely best in slot for those. It does okay-ish in RTA, but it's not that much of an early game unit. So since Feng Yang is that incredibly good in the specific thing, I would give it a 95. And Feng Yang is also one of those you could keep multiple off for Siege. Moving on next to a bunch of ponies. Amelia is used some stages in TOA where you want to go for the Bolvric. It's Siege offense with the Bolvric. It's also okay-ish. But I feel like ever since Alaya got released, Alaya does the defense buff pretty much as she does it. Provides as much immunity as she does. Plus she provides healing, whereas Amelia has 0 healing. So I feel like that Amelia definitely dropped down a decent amount because of that. So I'm going to give Amelia a 70 for that reason. Most of the time, 100 res, tanky via will. Elena is a decent a Leo counter, but it's more of a niche unit where you could say like, okay, is this my Leo counter or is that my Leo counter? There's a lot of options. You could go for Ken as Leo counter, Carlos as Leo counter, Elena's Leo counter, Balinus as Leo counter, Coco as Leo counter. It's just one of the options. It's not necessarily really bad unit to do it. She definitely has her usability, but she's not really doing it that great. I would say no, actually Siege offense. I have seen some Siege offenses where you go for like a Sean, then her, and then something else for like protection for her, and then she clears the whole thing by herself. So she has some value in there, but it's more niche where you could say like, okay, multiple units could have done her job. Most cases you want to go HP crit damage HP or speed crit damage HP or speed crit rate HP or something along those lines. Violent will, that's the main thing. With 100 crit rate, bit of accuracy. Diana is definitely one of those units. I feel like it's quite underrated for RTA right now. There's a lot of AoE hits nowadays. Sure, also a lot of those AoEs kind of deny her turns. But I do think she's really good in RTA still. Siege offense, I mentioned it a few times before. Let's say with a Leo and a Sean. Or let's go for a Diana with an Eladriel and a Triana. There's definitely a lot of options where she could steal the show that way. RTA can definitely be interesting as well. So I think Diana... It's mainly late game PvP, but she can definitely get her slot in there still. Most common build is HP crit damage, HP via will, but you could also go for, well, pretty much anything that gives her high HP, 100 crit rate, and then deal some damage. Keep in mind, her damage actually comes from attack, and her HP transforms into attack in her human state. So adding in more attack to this unit does actually increase your damage by a decent amount. It's not like a damage dealer by HP. It's a damage dealer by, like... It's like a pseudo damage dealer by HP because her HP gets translated into attack. But just adding in more attack to her is totally fine. Also, you want to go additional damage by attack rather than by HP for that same reason. Then we go for Jeanne, which is recently buffed that she has a 2-turn provoke, which actually, the moment I read it in the balance patch, felt pretty weak. But when I saw it mainly against fire monkeys, provoking a fire monkey for 2 turns is actually pretty nasty. So definitely a unit for RTA. Siege offense, I've seen it a few times as well against like a heavy stunning team such as, let's say, Celia. I've been using like Fire Monkey, Josephine +1 on Celia teams most of the time. It's definitely great for that. RTA, it's pretty nice as well, but it's still a little bit of a sacky unit that if you don't have your passive up and you get reset or you get pushed back or you get stunned in the first place, that's definitely a lot of issue scenarios where it's like, yeah, she's nice, but she's not really going to cut it. But most cases you want to build her still. Speed, crit damage, HP via will. or via Revenge. I recommend Will over Revenge. You could also go speed, HP, HP, and then just go full stacking on that shield, because a shield is actually an insane amount of shielding. Then we have Ophelia, which you do see sometimes in siege offense. You have this one siege defense as well with the Conrad, Ophelia, and Theomars. It's not a bad defense, but also don't necessarily claim it as very good. But it's mainly siege offense, siege defense. Main builds that you want to go for is via Will, and then maybe 100 res or high HP, something along those lines. Lewis is actually a unit I recently skilled up, and I'm enjoying a lot more than I thought I would enjoy it. It is just siege offense. I don't use it anywhere else than siege offense, but I think she's a best in slot for that team specific, which is the Lewis with a Rika and a Heigang. To the point that I actually wanted 2 of those. Anytime that there's a Clara on the enemy team without any cleanses, I just smack in that team. Lewis protects the whole team all the time. Rika can steal the whole, or kill the whole team, and Heigang gives the rest of the protection. It's really, really nice of a hit as well. Plus, Lewis skill 1 is pretty loaded. It's pushback and stun, which is pretty loaded for skill 1. So, pretty good unit, but it's just siege offense. Anywhere else, wouldn't really recommend to use that. Moving on next to an Abellio. Abellio is still for arena defense, but I think it's this lower rank arena defense, like in high rank arena defense. You barely see that, at least not in Europe. Siege defense, no. Siege offense, no. RTA, a little bit against like cleave teams, so definitely has its usage. Also, if you build more of a bruiser style and then high damage Abellio, it has its value over there. So it's a little bit everywhere. On defense, you just want to go more tanky on speed and HP, and then you're still going to go via Will most of the time. For RTA, you do want to add in crit rates and more defense, or even crit damage, and then you go from there. And in RTA, it's also common to get this thing on like pretty low speed, like plus 80 to plus 120 or something. And then you focus more on the damage stats. Balinus is still good for TOA, but he also kind of lost his slot where he's like a really good one in TOA, because there's a lot of things good in TOA nowadays. Mainly with the Amber being released, you saw a lot less Balinuses being used, because Balinus was kind of on the Amber slot before. RTA, you could make it a Leo count, but then again, it's also not that interesting. Arena, you could use it, but there's better options out there. So definitely a unit you could use for a lot of positions, but there's always a better option out there, kind of. So wouldn't really recommend to use it that much, but still, most of the time, a nice thing about him in RTA, if you go double Will plus Blade or Focus or anything like that, that he also, during his Beast form, he still has like full immunity during that time, so he cannot BCC during his rotation. That is definitely a nice way that I used to play it back in the days. But that is pretty much about it. And otherwise, if you use a PvE, it's just like swift, high damage, and high accuracy. Terranese actually has been recently buffed that if you hit it, he lowers the cooldown passive, so therefore he can get his revive in more quickly. He does do a good amount of damage. For that reason, you see him on siege defense a lot. Anywhere else, you don't really see him too much, but I think he has a decent to high value on siege defense nowadays that I do give him the value for that. Arena defense wouldn't really expect him. RTA, he could be niche here and there, but especially the siege defense, mainly based with like a fire Bayek, also known as the Assure, and then like an LD in the middle. That is definitely a defense that you see a lot nowadays. You can also put it next to a Kakano and a Miles, or like there's definitely a bunch of options. You do want to go decent damage on him. Most of the time also destroy. And then just violent, and then, yeah, the damage comes from defense, so you want to aim for that decent amount of crit rate. And that's the way to go for that unit. Then next up, we have a bunch of Lightning Emperors, which also has the Bill in there, which I forgot to put in there. Well, Bill is just absolutely best in R5, best in slot in R5. And you can use it in Subjugation, but it's just best in slot for R5 and nothing else than that. But since he's that much a best in slot in R5 by a really long shot, it is a must build for, I would say, every account. You could get your way around doing R5 without it, also solo R5s, but it's just that much better than most of it. So going for a Bill is just absolutely must in there. But it's not good for any of those things. Would not really recommend to use it there. It's actually just R5. It's just R5, but he's that insane in it. You just want to go high damage on it, and you can follow the build on whatever you see on like the dungeon guides for the R5. Bill is, or not Bill, Bolvric is really nice for siege offense still. It is okay in RTA. Arena offense, especially into server offense, if you want to clear things slowly, it is still usable. Plus you have TOA stages where he's pretty much a must use as well. So Personally, I don't use this unit that much anymore, but there's a few things where he's that insanely good with very low rune requirement. Plus, you don't need to put any Devilmons in. That's actually the only unit where I would say Devilmons barely matter. Like, it's very, very minimum. Whereas other units like a Tiana's, like, sure, it does 1 turn, but it's still nice if you do that extra damage, or it's still nice if you add in the skill 1 on, like, some of these units because the extra damage. Bolfric is just the skill 3. Like, the skill 1, sure, you got a little bit more strip chance, but it's barely necessary. So the low investment in Bolfric does make him a lot more interesting. So I'm going to put Bolfric on a 90 for that reason. Most of the time, you want to pair it with something that gives buffs on your team, so you're not reliant on the buffs on the enemy side. But since TOA, he is pretty much a must in some TOA hell stages, which just makes it get you extra free resources. So it is just a very good pickup for that reason. Siege offense is nice, and Interserver, if you care about free rewards, this might be your way to clear a lot of free rewards as well. So Bolfric is really nice. Most of the time, you just want to go 100 res. I think still best build is a Will, Shield, and Revenge. So you have the Will and Shield for the extra buff stacks. And then Revenge so you can steal something and therefore drain or like get extra stacks that way. 100 res, speedy enough in the right tuning, and then very tanky. Odin is something we see from time to time on Siege offense. We see it a decent amount on Siege defense, but it's kind of falling away. You used to see it with, like, let's say a Thessarion or Kakano and then Adriana Odin. That's a common defense, but it's also a defense that nowadays doesn't really provide that much. He's an okay nuker in the damage sense, but he's also not crazy good. He is also usable in R5, which makes him a little bit better, but I'm going to give him, well, let's say he's pretty all-round. He's pretty all-round. Wouldn't use him in RTA, though. Early game, he's not going to add that much except for R5, but 85 feels fine for the Odin. I would say for most builds, you just want to go 85 crit rate minimum, unless you'll use him as the crit rate lead that he has, then you can go lower. And I would say that just high damage. You could go on Violent, you could go on Swift. Then we have Christina, which is pretty much only used with the Leo Galleon Christina plus some kind of protection unit, mostly like a Delphoy or a Velagil or something along those lines. It is niche in that sense. It is definitely not bad, but I also don't think it is crazy good, because nowadays a lot of units do tend to counter that to a decent extent. So I'm just going to give Christina 70. You just want to build it on will, full damage. That's the main thing you want to go for. You can put some accuracy to land that Oblivion. It's definitely a nice to niche unit, but it's just arena offense and is legit in just one team. It's nothing else than just that one. Belial, however, is siege offense, but arguably one of the best siege offenses in game, which is Camilla Belial +1. And it's just insanely good. Belial is also usable in dungeons such as Giants. Belial, you could use it in R5. It's probably not really the best slot in there. And you could use it in RTA as well. Whereas in Arena, you can also, in Arena, especially in server guild battles, you can go for a Belial plus a Camilla as well. And you definitely want to keep multiple of those for siege offense. But yeah, early game, well, it could help you in R5. So I would say that Belial's pretty all-round. It's definitely not 100 because you could replace it on a bunch of slots as well. And it's not that crazy for RTA and a few other things. It's also not for defense, whereas like these are all like defense units, which is really insane. But yeah, Belial's absolutely a nice unit, and 95 for that one. Bale, however, did get a few buffs, has the anti-cleanse and blah, 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 whatever. But it's just arena offense and nothing else than arena offense. And he's also not really a best in slot in arena offense. Also, once again, because Zyros became so much better once again. This thing, like, if he was this before Zyros buff, this thing goes down. Simple as that. So 65 for Bale. Most of the time, just full damage build. That's it. Mephisto is still niche to good for some siege offense if they have a reviver. Same with arena offense for a reviver. So he does also have the boost in it, so you can use it as a booster as well if you put it on Swift. RTA, don't really like the unit. I've seen it here and there, but it's not really that great. But PvE, especially Giants, you can go for a Julie plus Mephisto team, so therefore the Mephisto does give a little bit more credit as well. I would say mostly for the siege offenses, arena offenses, there's better options out there than a Mephisto, but you could go for the Mephisto, especially if you go for a Cleave and then you let it boost and then the Kali moves and then the Kali boosts something else and then your Nuku moves and then something like that. That is definitely an option, but is it really a necessity in there? Hard to say, hard to say. Also, it's not used for RT. No, I'm actually going to give it a 90. I feel like it's fair because also in the Giants, it's nice. In siege offense, arena offense. If you go for some kind of team with like a Samath, you can outspeed it, Lucian it, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. it definitely has its usage in there. So Mephisto is not bad. Let's give it a 90. Most of the time, its build doesn't really matter too much. You just want to boost things. And in the case of dungeons, you want to make as much crit damage on you as possible. Because the skill 1 drains HP from one of the side things. Those have a lot of HP, therefore your crit damage is higher stack than your attack. So that is the main way that you would like to build a Mephisto. Moving on next to a bunch of Beast Riders. Barbara, it's just an RTA unit, but it's barely used in RTA because it's not really having a good slot at it right now. So speed, crit damage, attack, most cases Fire or Swift, but it's not really having the best of spots in there because it needs a good run investment that she's not really worth in most cases. Marsha, however, is also just RTA, but Marsha is actually really good. Most of the time, Vio Nem, speed, crit damage, attack, 85 plus on the crit rate. Very good into pushback units, which current meta has a bunch of, such as Cigar and whatnot. So definitely a nice unit, but I would say just RTA. I've seen some on Arena defense on Swift or Siege defense on Swift. It's not really the greatest, but it's mainly an RTA unit, so 85 for Marsha. Savannah is really good early game. It's definitely a lot easier to build than it was back in the days in early game. You can use it in your first Giants team, and it's going to make your first Giants team very easy to run, so it's definitely high value for that. It's high value for TOA. Siege defense, it is usable. It's no longer really a great one, but it is definitely usable. No, I'm actually going to give Savannah 90. It is something that's kind of rolled out of meta in like the high end, but I think early game, you're going to see it a lot on Arena offense, Arena defense. I would say, well, offense maybe not as much, but Siege defense, Arena defense. Dungeons, it's okay. TOA, it's okay. It's early game. It's just late game in RTA, not that great. But I think she's early game a lot easier to pick up right now by not having the resistance lead. And she's just overall, she has a pretty loaded kit. It's definitely not a bad kit for that. Maybe I should actually give her more value in high RTA as well. I would be curious if you actually give like really good rune investment to her, if she's gonna do good or not. Well, then again, the meta is also kind of heavy fire, and you want the wind units to be more of like supporty and actual proper CC like a Cigar than just a pushback. But yeah, she's pretty solid still. I would give her 9. No, I'm actually gonna give her 95. I think she's that insane early game. She might be one of the more insane early game units you could pick up. Like, sure, you could pick up a Teshar, but Savannah can also help you clear the dungeons. Savannah can help you clear TOA. Savannah can help you have like a first early good Siege offense, Arena defense, Siege defense. And if you want to step into RTA early game, in the lower, like, Conqueror ranks, you can use anything. If you give good runes to her, she will definitely do good. Savannah gets a 95, mainly because she's a lot easier to build right now with that Accuracy Awakening that she has. If she was better late game, she would be 100. That's the only thing. Like, late game, she kind of falls off. And that's the only reason why she's not 100. Hey gang, the unit that a lot of people really hate in RTA. So, I would say for Siege offense, very unique into Clara. It's pretty much an insta-win. Into a Dark Series, it's pretty much an insta-win. So very good for those specific things in Siege. RTA, really good. Arena offense is actually also really good because he is part of the core dot team. And the core dot team is Hey Gang, Rika, Trix, Seth, Nora, blah, 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 whatever dollars. But he's actually a core team. He's a core team member of that dot team. So Hey Gang gets a 95 for that reason. He's very good in all of those things. Now, also, I missed a few builds. For Savannah, I would say speed crit damage or speed crit... No, I would say speed crit rate attack makes it easy to get high attack value. And violent or swift. Hey gang, most cases dispare faster than your whole team. If you use in the dot team, it's 15 crit rate. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter too much what kind of stats you go on it. Just the speed tuning on the Hey gang makes most important. Jogun. I was going to say Jongnon, but I would say Arena offense, Siege offense, Siege defense. I see it sometimes Siege defense with the Sierra and then Jogun Kaki still some, or not Kaki, Kinky, something you see sometimes. Arena offense, it does have the attack buff and the strip, which is slightly unique in that sense. But it's often not really the best in spot because the skill 2 is kind of not working for the rest of his kit nowadays. When he was an RTA unit with the speed buff, he was, but nowadays with that, doesn't really work that much. So 75. Most of the time, you just want to build it on the right tuning where you can strip for the rest of the thing. 85 accuracy, and that's it. Chungpong, really good for TOA. I would say early game can help you out with Siege. Well, Siege offense is still really good because then you just go for a Diana Armor Breaker plus this, and the Armor Breaker could be a Truffle, could be a Galleon, could be the Dark Tanjiro, could be Neftis, could be a lot of things. It's definitely good with the Tiana and that. It's good in TOA. RTA, he definitely fell off a little bit because there's a lot of good fire units right now with the Valkyrja, with the Lucia, with the Fire Monkey, with the Marsha. That definitely made Changpeng hit pretty hard, where Changpeng is mostly not really worth the rune set that he requires to be picked up in RTA, which is Violent or Despair faster than your whole team, and also Heigang makes his life pretty troublesome as well. But I still think it's a very good unit. You want to build it fast. You can actually build high damage on him by crit rate, crit damage, accuracy, attack. But also you could just go for like high additional damage by speed, HP, attack, and then work your way around that way. So definitely still a bunch of options where Changpeng could be good. Now I'm actually going to one-up Changpeng because also early game, it's definitely going to help you out with TOA. Late game, I still use him in TOA. And Siege offense, Arena offense, there's actually options for him to still be good. So he has a lot of usages still. It's just that in RTA late game, he kind of falls off. Then we have the more in some Siege defense, you do tend to see a more. You could build it Swift, Despair, Vio, bunch of options. RTA, not used as much anymore, but also has some options. Arena defense, I've seen it a few times, especially if there's a thing that's rather than a Galleon does actually land an armor break by actively hitting something. More will pick up that turn, also gets an attack buff on that right now. So definitely has its usage over there. So it's a little bit of everywhere, but also never really insanely crazy good. Also early game PvE is not going to do that much, but I can see some value for him because he's used a little bit everywhere. In early game Siege, I would also be seeing him as like an early game strip-ish kind of unit. However, his strip is lowered in chances that I wouldn't really rely on him as like a core stripper. That's the only thing with the more out there. But he can do a decent amount of damage on like a speed, attack build, and then high additional damage by attack because he gets the attack buff as well. Could even go crit rate on it, but then you kind of need a defense buff on something else in the team. But he can do a decent amount of damage that way, and as I mentioned, could be Swift, could be Despair, could be Vio, could be Will, could be Revenge, could be like a lot of things. Then we have the Dugilas. Some Siege offenses, pretty much a guaranteed win. You don't see it all too often. RTA, often where you think like, oh, he's gonna get the win and he still disappoints. So he's kind of like a Laika, but a little bit better. There's some PvE stages I do tend to use him in. That's mainly Subjugation I like him in, and Wind Rift. He's pretty good in those two stages. But that is about it for Douglas. So since he's also good in some PvE stuff, he's still like often a must-ban in RTA. He could be very annoying in RTA. Most of the time, Vampire, high attack, because his attack scaling makes it where he has more chance to cleanse, or like the attack scaling compared to the enemy attack. Therefore, you want to have that high. You get the cleanses in, he hits hard, so Douglas get a 70 from me from that. Then we have Kashmir, and Kashmir is absolutely trash. In the trash, in the 50, right there. No, don't use this unit, it's garbage. Bornir is also kind of trash. He destroys HP from how much HP was already dealt by some other unit. Well, how about you just actually do more damage based on the damage that was dealt on the previous unit, and you just kill the unit rather than destroy the HP. That's kind of the scenario on Bornir. You want a really slow clear in Siege or Arena, can be used, but I wouldn't really recommend it. Probably some kind of file build or so. Cardinal, however, Arena defense, you see it from time to time, but in most cases, especially in Europe, anything that is an HP lead Arena defense is just weak. It's just Diana food, you can outspeed it, you can do anything to it, you will kill it at some point. There's just so many options to deal so much damage that it's very hard to tank for a Cardinal lead. However, he's also usable in RTA, where I would say in RTA, his spot is somewhat taken over by the Fire Bayek, also known as the Assure, because that one has the armor break, it has the healing, it has the strip into silence. So it's just a little bit more of a loaded kit than Cardinal is. Cardinal's a little bit better AoE, but I feel like if you have good Cardinal runes of speed, crit damage, HP, rather put those on the Bayek, the Fire Bayek, and it will probably perform better for you. So I'm gonna give Cardinal 75 for that reason. Cigar, however, is only RTA, but it is the highest contested RTA unit in SWC. So, since it is just RTA and nothing else than RTA, I'm going to give it a 90. But it is absolutely insane in RTA, and it's definitely one of those must-haves right now in RTA. And I wouldn't be surprised with the balance patch end of the month if he gets nerfed, because he's been that good for a while right now. Most common build, speed, HP, or speed, HP, accuracy. He does already have accuracy awakened, so he has already 25, so don't heavily overstack more than 85. And you want to go very tanky, but you also want to go a little bit of attack, because he is HP scaling to a certain extent, but he's also still attack scaling. So a little bit of attack on him is not too bad. And yeah, just tanky Fire Will. That's all. Shizuka is niche used here and there in TOA. In Siege offense, don't see that much. Arena offense, defense, not that much. It's just an RTA unit, but even in RTA, you don't see that much. And if you want to use an RTA, you need a very specific team revolved around her with a bunch of like nukers, such as like an Oberon or Federicas or that kind of stuff. And then a whole team based around it. Leo, or well, Leo not necessarily, but mainly a Ragdoll would help her a bit. She's okay in that, but she's also not really crazy good at that. So Shizuka gets a 75 most of the time. Fire Will, 100 res, tanky, decent amount of speed, and then some accuracy to land the debuffs on the skill 3. Tomoe. Tomoe is just RTA, and it's just RTA in one very specific comp. While you could use it in some other comps, but one comp that stands out, which is the Leila Tomoe Heigen comp. But I think especially in higher ranks, that's very much figured out, and people do know how to counter it. I would say Tomoe is decent in TOA as well, and therefore I give her a little bit more credit. She is pretty decent in that. She can also be used in Siege offense. Like if you go for the dot team in Siege offense, let's say you go for a Nora, a Trix, and then a Tomoe. It is definitely something that you can push back the whole team, and it's pretty nasty. It's actually pretty nice. Now I'm going to give Tomoe a little bit more value for that, because Tomoe could also work in the general dot team in Arena if you want to have a little bit more speed in it. Let's say you go for Tomoe, Heigen, Rika, and a Nora. It can definitely work for an Arena offense dot team as well. So I'm going to give a little bit more credit to Tomoe because she has a little bit more usage. But for RTA, I wouldn't necessarily say she's the best in slot. For the other things, I wouldn't also not necessarily say she's the best in slot. She's only like decent if you need her for the speed lead. Otherwise, it's probably better to just put another daughter in there. But for RTA, yes, she is the best in slot, but she's best in slot in a team that's a little bit figured out and like slowly falling out of meta. Gyo. Gyo is a sacky piece of shit unit in RTA, and most of the time doesn't really perform that well at it, but I'm gonna give that a 70. Most of the time, build on Despair. If she Despairs a lot, she's really good. If she never Despairs, she's really bad. That's no in between. Wouldn't use her anywhere else, so that's mainly just Despair, 100 res, and that's about it. Nana, you still see it a little bit on Siege defense. Some Siege offenses do use her. Arena defense, not as much anymore. She's really good in the bomb stage in the Labyrinth, because she will actually eat the bombs with her passive kind of style, so that's really simple. RTA, you also don't see it too much, but still an overall decent unit. That's not a bad pickup, so I'm gonna give it an 80. But I feel like often when you pick a Nana, another unit will probably have done similar to same. It's not really a must pick in there. Could be Vio, could be Will. You could build it on damage, you could build it on full tank. It's just a lot of options out there, just kind of depending which way you want to go. Coco is a unit that is just, I would say, some Siege offenses. I've seen it on Siege defense before, but it kind of fell off in there as well. RTA sometimes is a Leo counter, but it's just like a little bit of everything, except for PvE, but it's never really that good. You have to keep in mind with Coco, you don't want any crit rate or crit damage on it. All of the damage comes pretty much from the stacks of attack, and then you also want to go additional damage by attack or attack increasing effect in case you always have an attack buff. And then Vio Will is the most common build out there, and then depending how much speed and tankiness you need. Momo, you see a decent amount on Siege defense. Arena defense, haven't seen that much. RTA, haven't seen that much, so... And also, Arena or Siege defense, you don't see too much. You could go for a Vampire set on it. You could go for a Fire set on it. Does get the buff that if you get enough stacks that your skill 2 goes lower on cooldown, but most of the time the fights aren't that long that you actually get all the way to that point. Siege offense could be used, so a lot of places could be used, but it's probably not doing that great. So Momo gets a 70 for that. Probably speed, crit rate, attack, or speed, like anything of like the typical speed, crit damage, attack, speed, crit damage, HP, something along those lines. Miles. Miles is definitely a great RTA unit still. Arena offense, I could see people use it for some bruiser speedy comp. Arena offense, Siege offense, you can kind of use it. Siege defense, you can kind of use it. So it's a little bit everywhere except PvE, so we're going to give him decent credit for that. He's also low rune investment, and that makes him chill to use for a lot of people as well. If you just go for a Siege offense, like let's say you're more like beginner-ish game in Siege, if you just give like a Rakuni Miles and then some kind of tank for the last thing, you can deal enough damage while not having to invest like crazy runes into him, and it will definitely work. Also, RTA low ranks, he's absolutely a menace that's hard to deal with, which is the Rakuni, which is a 3-star easiest unit to pick up. So that is just not great for PvE, but early game, PvP, he's really good. So late game, he maybe falls off a little bit, still decent, but early game PvP, he's absolutely insane. It's just not good for dungeons. But 90 for the miles. Most of the time, you want to go for Violent plus Shield. And the Shield set is because the more buffs he has, the more he actually can stack on things. You could also go for Will on him and then Shield somewhere else, which actually helps his passive more than going Shield. And that is mainly for a Siege offense. So Siege offense, I still see a lot of miles being on Shield himself. But if you were to give Will, you get an extra buff and then you put the Shield somewhere else. So that is for Siege and Arena. That's one way to give him a little bit more stats. In RTA, most of the time you don't really know exactly what kind of comp you use it in if you always have a shield set for him. So then it's probably better to just go Will in that sense. Moving on next, John. Probably one of the better bombers for arena offense. Big issue is bombers are not really meta. Bombers are only good if someone decides to go like aerial with a bunch of Camillas. But most of the time you don't really see that kind of stuff. I would still argue that he is best bomber in game, so I'm going to give him credit for that. Because he has the increased cooltime while also landing a bomb, and then one bomb is one turn, which is definitely a factor where he does get a lot in there. Also, his skill 2 cycles, where his skill 3 goes lower on cooldown and stuff. So, definitely a nice unit if you want to go for a bomber, but he's just not used that much for a bomber. So, main build that you want to go for this one is just high attack, high accuracy, and that's all about it. Also, for the miles, I did forget to mention, you just want to go all in speed. You don't want to go crit rate or crit damage or attack. Just speed and tanky and a bit of accuracy. Then Oliver. Oliver for arena offense is actually pretty niche in the meta where there's a lot of Björnjils. And that is mainly against a Camilla. Oliver against Camilla, Oliver will always win. Oliver against a Björnjil, as long as Oliver don't go hard sacking on like missing all kinds of resets, Oliver will always win that. So Oliver next to like a Lucian comp with a Kabila, Dova, Lucian or whatever. If there's no fire units, Oliver can actually clean up the team, which is definitely a nice way for 33 in Arena. Siege, I've never seen it. RTA, it's still really good, so I'm just going to give it a 90 value on that. It's definitely still really good for RTA mainly. Arena offense, you can definitely use that as well. Early game, not a great unit. Then we go for Alaya. Wait, did we have Riley in there? Yes, I added in Riley as well. Alaya. First of all, Arena offense, best in slot for Leo team by a really long shot. Siege offense with a Leo team, absolutely best in slot. RTA, there are a few comps where you could use it. TOA, if you do have a stage which you want to bruiser out or you just want to slow clear your TOA and you want something to make it really safe, Alaya is really good. Definitely also a unit you want to keep multiple of. But I think Alaya is just simply that good in everywhere, except for RTA maybe, and maybe not that much early game. Well, actually early game as well, as long as you go in like early game PvE and not early, or early game PvP and not early game PvE. Alaya's that freaking... No, I'm actually going to one down Alaya. Because you're not going to use an RT. But Alaya's still insane. You want to keep multiple of those. Alaya's really nasty of a unit. Absolutely great. Most of the time, 100 res. Super tanky on Will or Nemesis or Revenge with Violent, of course. If you use it always next to a Leo, go 0 speed. I've seen some people going like 120 or 150 speed and you always use it next to a Leo. It's like, yeah, bro, just go HP slot 2. You're fine. You don't need speed on it. Next up, Nora, which is, I would say, best in slot for the dot team. And the dot team, once again, being the Heigang, Rika, Nora, +1. And why the Nora is that great is the Nora, the moment she's hit enough, her skill 4 does do a lot of damage because the more debuffs there are, the more damage she does. She has healing on that skill 1. She has provoke on the skill 2. She has just so much stuff going on. She lands dots for being hit while she provokes, so she's gonna get more hit. Absolutely insane for Siege offense if you want to go for a dot team in Siege offense. 100% best in slot for the arena offense that has actually the lowest rune requirements to kill G3 defenses. Sure, a lot of people did pick up like the anti on the Juno and the Varimals, but if they didn't, it's great. I'm gonna maybe one down it because it's not... Well, you could actually use it for some Siege defense as well. No, I'm gonna keep it high up. Plus, it's also great in TOA. No, 95 for sure. Yep. Great in TOA as well. Early game TOA, absolutely insane in there. Just RTA wouldn't use it over there. But anything else, it's pretty darn nice to have a Nora in there. Maybe the dungeons in R5, not that much. But it's absolutely a great unit. Wouldn't necessarily say that I would keep multiple of it. Like one Siege offense with this is probably enough. Most of the time, her build, Fire, Revenge. And then you want to go high on speed, high on accuracy, high tanky. If you do use it with a Heigang, I recommend to go Will on it. However, don't go for the Revenge in that case. Moving on next. Liam. Liam is A best in slot in a few PvE dungeons, but you could kind of replace that as well. It just adds in more rune requirements to do that. But in Dragons, I would say he's a best in slot for clearing the boss. In PC, he's best in slot for clearing the boss. For R5, you could also use him to clear the boss that way. I would say for Siege offense, Arena offense, wouldn't use the unit. But yeah, since he's that best in slot in 2 dungeons, he does get a decent amount of credit for that. Keep in mind, however, he only uses skill 3 when the boss is about like 35-ish percent HP, 30 to 35. Don't think that, oh, something is below 50% HP, Liam is going to kill that instantly with the skill 3 ignore defense. No, that's... He can do it, but he's only going to do it like, what, 70% of the time. So you're going to fail because of that. But Liam, still really good unit, 80 for that. Mainly, you just want to build it, high damage. That's all there is to it. Carlos. Carlos we have seen in some arena offenses, and the core arena offense that I've seen him in is a Leo plus Carlos plus a Konamiya, and then the Konamiya gets hit by a Triton, and then the Konamiya's double Nem will 100 res, and then the Konamiya can actually boost up a Lucian. Lucian moves, kills something, then Carlos can move and then start stacking his stacks. Something like that you see from time to time. I've seen some people use the Siege offense, didn't like it that much, but can definitely see some options in there as well. And RTA is trying to counter one of the better units out there right now, which is a Sonya. Does do an okayish job at it, but it's also not crazy good. But most of the time, either you want to go full damage on a Rage or Fatal set on him, or you want to go a Vampire set, still 100 crit rate, high attack, high crit damage, and that's the way to go. You could go low speed on him because he gets speed from the passive, but then you have to set him in a set where you can guarantee that he gets the speed from the passive. Then we have that Dominic. Dominic, you still see sometimes in Siege offense. Arena offense, I can see some huge for it as well. In the case, let's say you don't have a Feng Yang, but you still want to go for some kind of Leo bruiserish comp. You could go for a Leo Dom Riley. And I actually forgot to place the Riley, so we're going to place the Riley after that in a second. But yeah, that's definitely an option that you could go for as well. Dominic is also still good in RTA. He does have his issue that if he's below 50% HP, he loses a lot of damage on that final hit because he's starting to heal rather than going for the extra damage. But he's still in general pretty good. I like him on speed, HP, attack, or speed, attack, via will, and then high damage from additional damage artifacts. That is mainly his way to go. If you do, always place him with an attack buffer such as a Riley or Nikki or a Kovaci or anything like that. Then you could go attack increasing effect in the artifacts as well. So let's add in that Riley. I think Riley is very versatile and is very good. PvE stuff, not that much. Well, they're like the Labyrinth stage is good. TOA as like a fail-safe kind of mechanic, sure. RTA is usable. Arena offense, like I mentioned before, if you want to go for a Leo route with and you don't have Alaya, then Riley is absolutely your best in slot. Don't try to find another unit with a defense buff and some heals, because they're all crap. Just go for a Riley, it's a lot better. Sure, you don't have the defense buff, but then you could go for a unit that actually stacks by attack, such as Dom or anything like that. And Siege offense, you definitely see a lot of Siege offense as well. Let's say a Riley with a Heigang and then a Thessarion. Riley with, let's say, a Chandra and then a Federica. So you can go for the Chandra boost, Riley boost, and then Federica hits hard. There's a lot of options you could go with a Riley. So Riley is absolutely very good in that. And that's actually the full family at 95, which is actually a pretty insane family right there. So yeah, moving on. Oh, yeah, for the build for her, most of the time just 100 res, high tanky, in the right speed tuning, via will, via nem, via ref. Those are the main things. Minato, I am not a big fan of Minato. It's just an RTA unit. It's mostly a 5th counter pick, but it's also one of those things, like most of the time, it doesn't really perform like the way you would like to make it work. So I'm actually going to give Minato 65. I feel like he's pretty shit. Mostly built on Vampire. Could make him 100 res, high attack, high blah, 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 whatever stats that you want to survive, but it's not that great. Ren, however, I think it's a pretty legit unit. So I'm going to put him on 90. So it is a very good speed contester in RTA. It has higher base speed than an Ethna and a Sonya. So he has the option to actually mess up with those for sure. Also into an Ethna, if you do tend to outspeed, you can give silences, absorbs. There's a lot of things going on. Ren also does have a decent amount of damage. It's been common right now that you go for a siege defense with Ren, Twin Angels, and then some kind of LD unit next to it. And then you could build it either really fast or high on damage. There's a lot of options to that. I would also say for arena defense, it is an option to go for the Vanessa Triton and then a Ren next to that as well. So there's definitely a lot of options where I would say that Ren is absolutely a really strong defense unit right now. And it's always one of those units like, oh, is he going to be fast or not? So he has the danger in there. And that factor is also his uniqueness in that sense. So I definitely do think that Ren is pretty nice. And I'm going to give him 9 for that. Most cases, either you want to go the damage route on Violent and then high accuracy, high crit rate, high crit damage and attack. And then still tanky enough because he does get the threat state. Or you do want to go for very high speed and then accuracy and then whatever stats on that. Next up we have Zen. Zen you see sometimes on siege defense, but I don't like it that much, too hard countered by a Hey Gang. You do see it on arena defense as well, but then it's too easy to outspeed. So he's not really bad, but he's also not really great. Most of the time he's built on swift, high accuracy. You could also build some damage into him, but Zen, I'll give that an 80. He has some versatility, but it's not that great. Amber, however, Amber is still insane in TOA. Absolutely, if you want to clear TOA fast, best in slot, by a long shot. The only reason that Amber is not 100 for me is because Amber crits more on Camillas, which is still pretty common in arena defense. If she were not, or if she was able to not crit on Camilla, she would be 100 for me because she's very good early game for TOA. Here she doesn't work on the dungeons, she doesn't work in R5, but she's good in siege offense, she's good in arena offense, she is usable in RTA. RTA is a little bit more niche and you have to have a team that already has a bunch of thoughts and blah blah blah. She works best if there's already 2 debuffs and she doesn't have to provide those debuffs by herself. But she's absolutely really insane for a lot of those slots and there's a lot of options with her out there. Such as like combinations of like Nora, Amber, you name it. Anything that provides a few debuffs plus Amber does do a lot. Plus she is best in slot in TOA Hell mainly. TOA Hell, TOA Hard. So 95 for that. You don't want to go any damage stats on her. You just want to go high speed, high HP, decent accuracy via will or via revenge. Apparently revenge, I figured it out the other day. Revenge actually does work with her passive. So if she revenge on something that has 2 debuffs, she does actually mess that up really badly, so it's kind of funny. But in the sense where you use it with a Hey Gang, always go Will. Then we have Claire. Claire has a decent kit where she has the nuke on the S2. She has a semi-nuke on the S3. It's just good for siege offense, I would say. I have seen it as RTA Leo counter as well. So I'm gonna give that an 80 because she actually does have like decent amount of value in Siege. Now I'm actually gonna make her 75. I don't like her that much for Siege. For RTA I also don't like her that much, but she has that option to be a Leo counter. So for that, double Nem Will is an option. If you go for Siege, just go any nuking set in whatever way or shape that fits. Sonya, and Sonya goes straight to 100. She's not that much of an early game unit. However, she is best in slot in the Elunia dungeon, which in my opinion is the best dimensional hole dungeon to farm. She is a best in slot in the Punisher script by a long shot. She's really good at clearing that boss. She's insane in siege offense. I got 4 of her right now, and the last siege I actually used all 4. That's how good she is in there. In arena offense, she's also still insane because of Adriana, but also in siege offense, she's really insane because of Adriana. And she's an insane pick in RTA. So I would say from all of these hundreds, I think Sonya is even 1 step above all of these hundreds. I'm not going to make a 105 tier, but if there would be a 105 tier, she will be the first one to be in that 105 tier. That is how insane Sonya is. She's like, just for the sake of it, like this order doesn't really matter, but I just want to put Sonya first because that's the only one where I would say like, she's actually better than the other 4. Sonya's, no, actually for that reason, I think I'm gonna do this. Like I said, I have the option to do that. She's not by an insane amount better, but she is definitely better than the others. Because she's used everywhere. She's unique best in slot in most of those. And it's just the early game she's not great. But Sonya is really, really good. Main build for her is you want to go 100 crit rate, high attack. You could go high crit damage as well in the case of that you want to kill like a Byuncho or something like that. In teams with like Adriana or Chillings in siege offense or arena offense. In RTA, most of the time you just want to go very fast, good speed contester. Also often a must ban. It's just Sonya's really, really insane. So I'm going to give that 101. However, early game, she doesn't have that much value. That's the only thing where she kind of falls off. But then again, early game you can do with most units. endgame, you need the specific unit. So therefore, I give more value to the endgame, and she's that insane in endgame. So Sonya, 101 for that reason. Then we have Manon. You see her some time to time on Arena Siege defense, but I feel like she kind of fell off in that. Mostly built on speed, crit damage, defense, or speed, crit rate, defense, defense, crit damage, defense, via will, something along those lines. But she's kind of on the point where, like, for Siege or Arena defense, she doesn't really do it that well. But she could do her thing. Alice is that unit where if she has her stance, then based on her defense, everything else will do less damage to your team. It is niche, could give you a win here and there in Arena or RTA, but it looks nice if it works, but a lot of the times it's not as great. So I'm going to give that 75. Most of the time she is bolt swift though. Then we have this thing, which I think is called Jade. It is used in some TOA stuff, but it's really not used that much. I think she's kind of like a boosted math, if I remember correctly. But it's just a unit that has a lot of replacements. She's not really that much of like, oh, you should go for this unit. So I'm just going to give it 70. Probably some kind of like Fio tanky build. That's all you want to go. Adriana. And Adriana goes up to the 100. Do we go Adriana to 101 though? No, the reason is that Adriana is not that crazy in RTA. Adriana needs like a whole team around her to be crazy in RTA. She's just crazy in Siege offense, Siege defense. So for that reason, Adriana stays at 100, but she's still insanely good at that. Speed buff, attack buff, and immunity on a high base speed. While also having Oblivion on the S2 and a recovery on the S1. That's just a loaded kit. Absolutely insane. It's just for RTA, she is a little bit harder to fit in. Like if you ban the Adriana, the other units have a struggle. If you ban the damage dealer and the Adriana doesn't boost anyone useful, you have a struggle. So mainly the ban phase is what Adriana doesn't give like the 101. If the ban phase wasn't in RTA, she would have been 101 as well. So for that reason, a 100, but absolutely really strong unit. Most cases, you just want to go as fast as possible. All of the other stats don't really matter too much. And that is just about it. There are a few places where you maybe want to put some damage on it or high HP, but if you go like full on broken slot 4 at flat attack, slot 6 accuracy, if it's high speed, you don't care, it's fine. That's also the thing about Adriana. That just makes it nice. I got 4 of those. That already says something. Like if I have 4 of something, then it says that you want to keep those for Siege. Also for Arena, really good. Like any attack buffer in game is kind of shit, mainly because Adriana is that good. Like I pulled a Woolyong, like, oh cool, Woolyong. It's like, yeah, but Adriana is so much better. Fuck you, Woolyong. That's kind of the issue with the Woolyong in the first place. So yeah, Woolyong, insanely good. Lucia. I feel Lucia is insanely good. And mainly good for RTA. Siege offense, there's a few offenses where it's like a nice unit where it cannot be stunned and therefore it heals a lot. Let's say that you're fighting like a Celia, or you're fighting a unit that would stun a lot. Then Lucia would be nice, but it's mainly for RTA. But the RTA meta is still a lot of control pushbacks or stunts. And then we're talking about Olivers, we're talking about Cigars, we're talking about a lot of those kind of annoying units. And Lucia would do insanely well against those. That's absolutely triple revenge on this unit is all the way you want to go for it. And then I see some people go for resistance. Don't go for resistance. Don't care. You just go speed, HP, or even triple HP, high HP, triple revenge. And you just want to get as much healing in from that skill 1. Because every time you revenge, like, oh, you hit me for 5k. Now I revenge for 8k heal. Get the fuck out of here. Such an annoying unit. Really good. Lucia, absolutely 85 for me. Very strong. Then we have Angela, which is kind of on the same thing. It is good. It is kind of like a Raccoon-ish. If the enemy doesn't have any form of sustain, they could die to your shields. But I feel like it leads a little bit more setup where I would say like next to a Ragdoll, or next to another shielder, or next to something else. Whereas Lucia's just like, oh, you pick this, so because you pick that, I can pick this. That is the big factor. Like, it's the same as the Juno. Juno, you can just smack in any team. Lucia, you can smack in any team. Angela kind of needs it can smack in many teams, but not as much. You can also use this in Siege offense for something that doesn't have any form of sustain, but it's mainly an RTA unit. In this case, I would say Vio Revenge or Vio Nem. And you still want to go like high HP. You could go 100 res, or if you always use the res lead, then you just go for that. Zibala. Zibala is just an RTA unit. I have seen some people use it in Siege offense. I wasn't a big fan. Also, Sibala, I think it kind of fell off in RTA for an insane spot, but it's still a pretty darn good unit. But it is just RTA, but I'm actually going to put it on 80 because it's just RTA. It's nothing else in RTA, and it's not really an insane in RTA unless you have like very specific LDs to spare with it, because I think it's really good next to a Han. It's really good next to a Yan Hong. It's really good next to a Wunsa. If you don't have any of those, the Sibala also kind of falls down where you just need like the Sierra, Oliver, Robo, this, and then what is your other stripper that kind of works if you don't have a Gianna, if you don't have some of those units, it just gets a bit worse. So Sibala gets an 80. Most of the time, you just want to go fast on it. That's the main thing. Fast, bit of high of HP helps you. Zima. I think Zima's just an RTA unit as well. It's mainly a strip unit. It does have the silence, it does have the silence and also the anti-cleanse, which does counter Heigang a little bit. The only big issue is that it's a element where it struggles into hitting on water. If it was a light or dark with the kit of Zima, it would definitely be really good in RTA, but it's just an RTA unit, which I think is not the craziest of value. You also kind of want to put it on Violent, but you could put it on Swift as well. And you could go high HP, high attack because of the bomb, and then accuracy next to that. Smicer is also just an RTA unit, but Smicer was hit, I think, one of the hardest by the healing reduced from 15% to 10% on the whole Puppeteer family. And therefore, I feel like Smicer definitely fell down a little bit. Lower end of RTA, let's say Conqueror, maybe even Punisher. Smicer is still pretty good, but higher ends, I think Smicer just dies off too easily. It's not going to do that much. So I'm going to put that on a 75 as well. You could maybe still bruise with it in like a siege offense or something like that, but PvE related, you don't really going to use it. It's just an RTA unit. And let's say we're going to go for a speed, HP in most cases on a Vio Will, Vio Nem, Vio Ref, anything along those lines. Then we're into the AC units. So for AC units, we're starting off with a Ivor. It's very good on defense, but mostly if it's good on defense, it's just good with a Sylvia. There's a few other options where you can put it on siege defense. It is pretty annoying. It does have a lot of multi-hits. It can provide the armor break. It is hard to kill, so there's a lot of things going to that kit. Let's say you combine that with the Terranese and then her and then Ashur or something like that. But is it really that great for it? I'm not sure. Siege offense, you're not going to use. Arena offense, you're not going to use. RTA, you're not going to use. PvE, you're not going to use it. So just a 75, just a defense unit. But it can be pretty good. There are certain thresholds that she needs, but I don't know that's a bit hard. So I would recommend to Google those if you want to know those thresholds to get all of the passives in for her. But she can definitely be annoying on defense. Mainly siege defense. Federica. Federica is insanely good for siege offense. Arena offense has some options. RTA definitely strong as well. PvE is not going to use that much, but most of the time, especially for RTA, you want to build it double Nem and Will. You could also go for Nem Blade Will. You want to go as little HP and defense as possible. Decent amount of speed, mostly around like the 60 to like 120-ish. Or like I would say 60 to 90-ish is what you commonly see. A little bit more is better, especially if you go Blade. And then you just want to go as high damage as possible that you can take out those monkeys, like the Fire Monkey, Wind Monkey, Vanessas, anything of those kind of things, or even like a Ragdoll or a Gapso. That's the main thing she wants to counter, and she's pretty darn good at that. Then we have Eleni, which is a little bit weird. I don't really like her. Some people have tested her, but apparently, she's also still bugged that she's supposed to get like a full turn, or at least for the attack bar that she gains, she should be getting a full turn, but she doesn't really get that. Skill 3 is a little bit weird. Skill 2 is the same as the Federica, but it's just not really enough. So I'm going to put Eleni on like a 70. I'm not really sure where I would use her. I think like if you build a whole team around her, she could be used, but don't really like her that much. Once again, you also just want to go for like high damage on this, but you can also go high speed. Then we have Lionel, which I think is a unit in RTA. You don't see it as much anymore. It used to be the core unit for the Maximilian team. You still see it in siege defense with Maximilians and Neftises, but I think just Maximilians and Neftises. And I would say it's just a defense unit nowadays. You don't really see it too much anywhere else. You could potentially use it anywhere else, but it's kind of that risky unit that isn't that great. He is actually very good for a bomb team. So let's say you go for, I think that's actually best in slot bomb team at the moment, which is a bomb team where you go for a Sierra, Lionel, John, and a Ganymede. So with the strip, you boost up the Ganymede. Ganymede reduces ATB on everyone. And then John and Sierra can actually land a proper bomb. I think that is the best bomber team out there right now, because you have the attack buff, you have the speed up of your team, at least for the Ganymede. That is the main important one. Then the reduce, and then you have also the cooldown decrease on the John. So I think that's best in slot bomber team right now if you want to go for bomber teams. But yeah, is it really that great? No one's really using it that much. So just gonna give that a 75 for that reason. Then we have Patrick, which is a best in slot in Steel Fortress. No, Steel Fortress maybe not, but Punisher script for sure. Steel Fortress, it's optionally usable as well. But anywhere Siege or RTA, you're not going to use that. I also do tend to use it in the Subjugation boss, and that's about it. But Patrick, since he has like the PvE value, I do place him up here because he's that unique that he's not really easily replaced. Sure, you could put a Bethany on his spot, but this thing will always ignore defense to a certain extent, also with the skill 1 and the skill 2 also in later rounds. Whereas a Bethany has to use that skill 3, otherwise it's kind of shit. So 75 for Patrick for that reason. Then we have the Assure, and Assure is definitely core meta for Siege defense nowadays. It is a core unit for RTA. Siege offense, I could see it being used as well. PvE early game, wouldn't really recommend to use that because it needs a very good rune requirement to actually work. But Assure is definitely a really strong unit. And teams that I mentioned before, Assure or Firebike with the Terranese and LD, super common nowadays. Or you use that... well, pretty much that's like just being annoying. It has the strip, it has the cleanse, it has the armor break, it has a all loaded kit. For RTA and also for defense, most of the time you wanted to go decent damage on it. Speed, crit rate, HP, speed, crit damage, HP. I would say crit damage does a lot more damage than crit rate. If you feel like, oh, it's dealing no damage, then that's probably why. You could also make it as a main cleanser and you just go speed, HP, HP, and then go for a little bit of damage in the additional damage artifacts by HP. It is an option out there as well. But it's definitely a very versatile unit with a pretty loaded kit. So Baya gets a 90 for that. Most of the time, via will. Then we have Sahat. And Sahat is pretty nice too. Sahat is also used for... No, actually, I think it's the same rank. Because for Siege defense, Sahat, let's say you go for a Sahat next to a Vitra and a Chandra, or a Chandra Escher Sahat, it's really good. I would say in RTA, it has a little bit less value, in my opinion. But you could also use this on Destroy in an arena offense. Like if you want to make a slow arena offense, let's say you go for a Leo, Sahat, Nora, and some kind of Pheromos or whatnot. Sahat can deal enough damage to actually slowly chip things down with Destroy and just kill that as well. And with the Nora, you can get a lot of things in. So if you want to make an auto team and you don't have a Alaya, then a Nora combination Leo Sahat +1, I would say Pheromos, because it also has the dot, it has the stun, it has the cleanses. It's definitely a way that you could work around with that as well. Then we have Pajama, Piranha, whatever his name is. I would say arena defense, sometimes RTA. Some people were really hyping up in RTA, but then again, I never really saw it. Does have his potential to cycle around enough where the enemy doesn't really get a turn and you're just like constantly provoking things. It's pretty nice in that. For builds, I would say probably just speed, defense, or speed, defense, HP. Also the build for Saad, speed, HP, HP. That's the only way. You just want to get as much HP and speed in as possible. But for this thing, yes, it has defense scaling. I'm not entirely sure how much. It's never stated anywhere how much it exactly is. Not sure if crit rate is his right way to go. I think you just want to go tanky on him. High defense, high HP. Then we have Vandon, and I actually never seen Vandon being used. I probably it does something, but never seen being used. Maybe it's not grouped. Maybe it's just underused. I don't know. Then we have Chakra, and I think Chakra is a decent unit. I tried it before in arena offense with a chilling comp. It does do a decent amount of damage in RTA. You could make it work. I think it's kind of underused. It's a little bit like a Miles, but it does a little bit less damage, and he's less tanky. That's kind of the main thing. So also for builds, most of the time you just want to go high speed, and then some accuracy, because he does have strip, he does have branding, so that helps out a bit. But since he's not used that much, I feel like in most cases he wouldn't work as well as you would think he would work. So 75 for that unit right there. Irene is actually used nowadays in RTA. She does have that lock skill that also chips away damage. She has a skill too that can be annoying as well. But is she really that great? I'm not sure. Most of the time in RTA, she's built on like a swift build, same as you would build like a Doomon, like a let's say 300 speed, So plus 200-ish speed on a swift build tanky, max accuracy, and then you just work away that way. But if you were to miss your skill 3, it's kind of bad. But she does now also strip and steal, and then put you in the trap. So it is definitely a way to lock out a unit in an RTA match for a little bit. You're going to see that in Siege or Arena. I don't really think so. So I'm just going to put Irene at 70 for that reason. Then we have Bludja, and Bludja has the biggest issue where she has a crit awakening. Otherwise, she would be meta for the dot team. However, she's still really good if you want to go for, if you simply don't care about Camillas or there's no Camilla. She's a really good daughter. She's good for TOA. She's good for siege offense. Let's say you go for a siege offense of a dot team with like a, what's his name? Mugwang? Mugwang, this thingy? Mugwo? No, Mugwo was, I don't know. I think Mugwang. But this thing that destroys HP based on the dots landed with this thing and then a Nora, Bludja can definitely be pretty interesting for that reason. It's good in TOA, it's good in, well, RTA wouldn't really use that. I think Rika and RTA is probably more sophisticated for that. So it definitely has its few usages and it doesn't have that much rune requirement. So Bludja gets an 85 from me for that. Would probably be more interesting if she didn't have the crit awakening but an accuracy awakening, and then you could place her instead of the Rika in the dot team. Because the dot team with Rika gets a slow, and therefore they get less turns, and therefore they also, yeah, just simply die slower. But with Bludja, it's just straight up shit ton of dots, and they could insta-kill based on all of those dots. Then we have Layla. And Layla is the core unit in the Layla Tomoe Hey gang. Once again, it is a little bit figured out, but it is still a pretty strong thing out there, especially in lower ranks. It is still something that people do struggle to deal with. But I think it's just RTA. Wouldn't really recommend her to use it in Siege or Arena that much. So we're just going to go for Layla at 80 for that reason. No, actually 75, because Tomoe I placed higher because you can also use it in TOA. You can also use it in Siege offense, Arena offense. Layla's just RTA, and she's okay to good in RTA, but she's not really crazy good in RTA. Like in higher ranks, people definitely did figure her out. Unless you have some whole LD kind of shenanigans that you can pivot around with like a Lipolar Queen and a Nefties and then a bunch of like nuking units at the end if things go wrong or something like that. That's definitely an option, but if you don't have that... Then we have Jongnam, which is just an RTA unit, but a really good RTA unit at the moment. It's probably one of the better ones out there. I haven't really seen anyone bruiser in it with Siege, but I think he could. PvE-wise, not going to use that at all. Or Arena-wise, not going to use that at all. But he's definitely having his usage in RTA a lot. Most of the time, you do want to build it on speed, HP. You could also, if you always work with a Death Break, that you can go for speed, crit rate, HP, and then his skill 1 and skill 3 can do a lot of damage. But if you go low HP, S2 does do a lot more damage. High accuracy is better, but I wouldn't necessarily go for the accuracy S6 on it, on the slot 6, because it is an option, but I like more HP rather than high accuracy on the Jongnam. Plus he, no wait, he doesn't awaken into, he awakens into speed. So yeah, does have a good amount of speed. He doesn't have the highest amount of accuracy right away, but still, HP is more value for him than accuracy, I would say. But that's also depending on the playstyle. Then Mugwang, I think, I probably forgot his name. It is just good for siege offense where you care about lowering the HP of the enemy by the dots you do. And that is mostly in the team with like Mugwang, Nora, and then like a Rika or Bludja or something like that. The reason that he's not really great in the dot team for arena offense is because he lowers the enemy HP and therefore it takes longer to kill things. In siege, as long as you win, doesn't really care how long you take out of that win. In Intersurfer, same thing. But in Arena, you kind of want to clear fast. And the thing is, let's say that you destroyed 70% HP. Your dot is going to deal damage from the max HP that is currently at 30%. So you're going to do 5% of 30% rather than 5% of 100%, which is technically the same fucking shit. So destroyed HP is not going to really help you clear things faster. So yeah, your dots technically deal less damage and there's less HP, so they deal the same damage. But you feel like you're killing things while you're not actually killing things. And just that makes it a lot slower. So yeah, for Arena, less value. In Surf Battle, yes, good value. Siege, good value. 75 for that unit. Most of the time, you just want to build it like Vio plus whatever. You plan to outspeed or you underspeed and then you go Will. And then you just go tanky, high accuracy. Byuncho. Byuncho actually in the previous ballot or the previous tier list that I saw him, he was one of the worst units. Throughout 2024, he has been one of the best units because he was good in RTA, he was good in Siege offense, he was good in Siege defense, he was crazy in Arena defense. Arena offense probably not, but he was really crazy in all of those. Currently has been nerfed. People also kind of figured him out. I still think that you can use him in Siege offense and defense, Arena defense as well. RTA, I actually like him on a triple NEM build against Lucifer teams. So you just go high damage, high crit damage, high HP, high attack, decent amount of speed, damage on light against the Lucifers and the Talisman and those kind of things. And the moment that they smack those in, they're just gonna fight the Björncho, and Björncho's gonna one-shot that whole team. It's kind of funny, but you need the decent runes for that. But more commonly, Arena defense, Siege defense, he's definitely not bad for that. So I'm still gonna give Björncho a good old 9. He's nerfed, he's definitely not best in slots anymore, but he's still kind of decent to good in all of those. It's just early game. Well, early game PvE is actually pretty good. No, wait, early game PvE is really bad. Dungeons is really bad. RTA, TOA is really bad. Early game PvP, he's actually pretty nice because he's simple to build. Then we move on to Twin Angels, which has recently been more of a Siege defense as well. It's just Siege defense and RTA. Anywhere else, he's not really that great. But he's really good at those two. That is the main thing. He's really insane at those two. You could build him Swift, and then you boost up a fire unit to be the same speed as a Swift unit. You have that single target, strip plus armor break, so therefore boosting up a Cigar makes it where Cigar has one extra unit that he can provoke pushback. Whereas you didn't have to target that one. Plus on defense, you can actually build it high on damage or violent, and then he could be pretty annoying as well. So Twin Angels, the Judy Hull and Rama, or whatever the name is, gonna place that at 90. I think it's a pretty decent unit. Fire one, however, did get a buff where his immunity is now 2 turns, but I still don't really like this unit. I feel like he's trying to kill units with the death resistance kind of mechanic that he has, but he just deals too little damage to actually make it work. So I'm gonna put that at 65. I don't really like that much. Wind one, I actually have to double check what it does, because in all honesty, it's probably garbage enough that I don't really exactly remember. So he has the attack speed, he has immunity. Other side, we have remove all beneficial effect AoE and a slow. So you have speed and slow. Okay, it's not the worst, it's not the worst. Could be a niche-ish RTA thing, but then again, it's more niche than actually great. We have the Water Geralt, which is just an early game PvE unit. It's definitely not bad to pick him up for giants, dragons, but also TOA stages. So I'm gonna give him 75 for that, but it's really just the early game. Late game, you're not gonna use him at all. Most of the time, you just want to build him like damage. High crit damage because his skill 3 skills of that. You have the Fire Geralt, but Fire Geralt I feel like is somewhat overrated. In the end, I feel like Rika does her job better than the Fire Geralt like 90% of the time. Because of that slow, because of the cycling on the skill 1, because of the skill 2 being stuns. So I definitely do like Rika more. But you could place him in the dot team, you could place him early game PvE, you could use him in Siege, you could use him in Arena, you could use him in RTA, so you could use him, yes, everywhere. But I still feel like a Rika would do that job better. And if you have something that does the job better, his value goes down a little bit, so maybe even just 90. But that's kind of my feeling, because if you have a Rika, why would you use Fire Geralt? That's just mainly it. Yep. I'm gonna go 90. But if you don't have a Rika, Fire Geralt's probably your best replacement for that slot. So I'll just give that a 95 for that. Wind Geralt, absolute trash. Never use that. Also, the build for the Fire Geralt, pretty much same as Rika, just high tanky. Also, the thing is, I think by base stats, I would have to double check that. Is the Fire Geralt less tanky by base than a Rika? I do think so. This is Fire Geralt. Yeah, okay, no, that's actually a lot worse. This is the Fire Geralt, right? Yeah, that HP and that defense is horrendously low. If we compare that to a Rika, how much is Rika for those stats? Rika, yeah, that's a lot more. That's definitely a lot more. Wait, how much was the defense? We're looking at 637. And this is also 637. So a good 1,000 more HP on base. And that's with all of the multipliers. I definitely do like a Rika myself a lot more. It's a lot harder to kill. Then next on, we have Series. And Series, we're starting off with the Water Series, which I think is an insane unit at the moment. Mainly Siege offense, Arena offense, RTA a little bit less. So I'm just going to go over here for 95. But in a lot of cases in Siege offense nowadays, mainly because there's a lot of fire bikes on defense. I feel like a Ciri is better in slot than a Sonya. And Ciri does pretty much as much damage as a Sonya. Plus, Ciri's skill 1 is a lot stronger than Sonya's skill 1. Where Sonya's skill 1 is like double 4Ks, Ciri's skill 1 could be like double 9 or double 10Ks. Like, it's really insane for like how much damage that skill 1 does. Plus, she is harder to kill for the fire units, which does help out a little bit, because most of the teams are a Adriana, Ciri, and a Mieng, whereas like the fire unit will instantly go for the Sonya and might actually screw your unit up. Also into Carcano, Ciri is just a lot better for that sense. So I definitely for Siege like her more. Also for arena offense, if there is a finesse in the team, you cannot really go in with a Sonya. The Ciri has to clear the finesse first. So that sense. RTA, however, RTA, she does really need the setup. Whereas Sonya and RTA doesn't necessarily need the setup. Ciri really wants that speed buff. If there's no speed buff on a Ciri, there's pretty much no damage. So she needs that Adriana or something else to buff for it, and then you have kind of the ban issue. And because of that ban issue, she definitely gets a little bit lower value. So Ciri gets a 95 from me. You don't need any crit rate on it, just high speed, and you want to go swift, crit damage, attack, high speeds, that's it. Then we have this thingy, which is also... Yeah, I'm not liking it that much. It's oh wait, I thought this one was the one that's bugged, but I think that's this one. That's the one that's buggy. Wait, what did Eleni do? Maybe I misjudged there. Is that the one attribute advantage? Oh no, wait, this is the reset, and this one that's also shit. And this one is the one that pushes yourself up. Okay, so I thought that this one was the one that pushes yourself up, but yep, this one. Same thing. It doesn't do enough. 70. You can build it on Swift and stuff, but yeah, kind of. The water gen is, I would say, pretty much just good for the RTA team of the Layla Tomoe Heigang team. It's kind of like a Beth level, but I feel like Beth often does it better. Sure, it does have the Oblivion on it, but Oblivion and stunts, but I feel like she often doesn't fit, and if she does fit, she's a must ban, but you have the freedom to actually ban her, so I give that a 70. It's just for RTA. Most of the time, just tanky. This thing, I've actually never used this thing. It is too random of where she spreads her debuffs. Sure, she has the Oblivion and she can spread that Oblivion, but it's too random of where she does spread that too, and you cannot really control that. If you were to be able to control that a bit more, she would definitely be better, but now it's just too random, not good enough for that reason. Fire Triss. Fire Triss is actually really good for siege offense, arena offense, pushback, branding, glancing, I think. Is the final one glancing? I'm not 100% sure if that was glancing. There was something else, right? Branding, yes, and glancing. Okay. And you do also have extra damage for critical hit. So you do always want to use it on non-water elements. RTA, you're not going to use it. TOA, you could actually use that as well. It does also have the stun and armor break on the skill too, which is definitely not bad. So definitely good arena offense, siege offense unit. So I'm going to place that at 80. I think she has pretty potential and pretty good value throughout. It's just not an RTA unit. No, actually, I'm going to place her high. I kind of like her. 85. I feel like 85 is fair. Then next up, we have Kid, which is a scuffed version of a Veronica for Stripper. Not the biggest fan. Also for her, just 100 crit rate, and you want to go like crit damage, and then either Swift, Vio, or... No, wait, Swift, Fatal, or Rage. Any damage set is fine. Kids, yeah, not the biggest fan. 65 for me on that unit. I feel like it's just kind of too niche. Like, sure, he strips, increases cooldown, but yeah, it's just not doing enough in my opinion. So I'm gonna give it 65. Most of the time you build it on Swift, high accuracy. Tricks, however, I really do like myself. Tricks is, I would say, for arena offense, best in slot for the dot team. And the reason that he is best in slot for the dot team is because he has the buff block. So if you're fighting a Giselle, it's really good for that. If you're fighting a Björnchol that is going to try to steal your buffs, it's really good for that. It has a very consistent strip. Plus, he has a good amount of damage himself. The passive also works very well with Rika and Nora. So for me, best in slot for the dot team without LD5s is the Heigang, Trix, Rika, and Nora. It's just absolutely incredibly good. Way of building it is also, once again, if you use it in the dot team, 15 crit rate, and then you want to go 100 res, high accuracy, and in the right speed tuning that he moves just in front of the other two. Because he does have the best chance of stripping. Plus the debuffs that he provides is pretty nice as well. You can use him for RTA as well. It's a unit that you could use in RTA if you use a lot of dots in the first place. It is a little bit more niche, a little bit more rare. I have also seen people use tricks next to a Jungnam. Wait, where the hell is my Jungnam? Right over there. It is definitely a niche way of using that as well. Also, early game TOA, really good unit. So overall, tricks, really good. Then we have Storm, I think. Yeah, I think so. But this unit, I tried it a bit on Siege defense, Arena defense. Not that great. It's too easy to ignore. Like, sure, he has to reflect the moment that he dies, but then you just make sure that the support hit it with like a weak hit, and then it's just fine like that. He doesn't strip, he doesn't do too much like that, so I'm just gonna give Storm a 70. Most of the time, you just want to build it some kind of damage set on Via Will if you put it on defense. Then we go for the JJK unit, starting off with the Water-Yuji. That is the one that also has the death resistance kind of, or death denial kind of ignoring thing. It's not that bad for Siege offense hit, but it's just kind of niche in a Siege offense hit. I've seen some people use it here and there, but it feels a little bit too niche. But it could be used in some kind of damage setup, speed, with crit rate, attack, and then high additional damage artifacts because he has a decent amount of multi-hits. Something like that. Fire Yuji is actually really good in Siege offense and Arena offense. There's only one big issue that right after that, the Zyros got buffed to take over his spot altogether. Because he does have, I think he has the guaranteed crit, doesn't he? He doesn't give a shit about elements. Do you have a guaranteed crit? The attack will always land as crit. Yep. He does have destroyed HP, which is definitely nice against Björnjals for cleanup. So if the Björnjal has low HP or like a Kinky, or no, wait, not a Kinky, a Kinky has low HP, it's definitely nice in that. But the big issue is Zyros just overtook his spot by a long shot. Plus Zyros is better in TOA. Plus Zyros is better in Arena. Plus Zyros is better in Siege. In RTA, you're not going to use neither. So yeah, he lost his all best in slot value by all of that. If you don't have a Zyros, I do think that a Fire Yuji is a decent option. Also, Zyros has a lot more damage than Fire Yuji. That's also a thing. Water Nobara. I'm not a big fan of this unit. I think her hairpin skill 2 is a little bit too RNG of where it lands to. Her skill 3 is now a guaranteed land for the dots and stuff, so you could put it in a dot team, but in a dot team you want to have like the 15 crit rate, the anti-cleanse adds in a little bit, but it's just too little dots, so it could be used, but I don't like it that much. It's just the typical tanky build and then surviving and then placing the debuff style. Windowbearer, I think, is slightly underrated. I think she's actually pretty useful in a Siege offense. That is, she has debuffs. She's gonna do a lot of damage to the enemy. In Siege, you can really get a controlled environment where you can guarantee that she gets debuffs, which is pretty nice. In RTA, you can also kind of make your way around that, especially if you're playing against the Tomoe, Layla, Hagen comp. A Water or a Windowbearer actually does fuck it up really badly. Like, you should try, like, if you struggle against that, try out the Windowbearer. It actually does fuck them up really badly. It's kind of funny to see. So definitely has its niche usage. So I'll give it like some value for like uniqueness in the way that she is played. But she's definitely like end game for mainly Siege offense and RTA. But she doesn't do it that well. So back to 80. You just want to build her very tanky. Very tanky on Nemesis. I think that's the way I would build her. Don't build her on high resistance because she wants to get the debuffs to actually get like her annoying shit in. Then we have the Fire Megami. Fire Megami in RTA has a pretty low win rate, and the main reason for that is that he's overspammed. It's definitely one of those units back in the days we had that with Indras. It's like, oh, I'm losing my draft, Indras. Fire Megami is kind of on the same style, but I actually do like him a lot for the potential that he has for stunning. But he's just an RTA unit, and he's not doing it that well. He does have nice potential. But I'm gonna give him an 80 for that reason. It's good, but he's not doing it that well from like the win rates and that kind of stuff. So gonna give him a little bit less credit for that. Plus, he's only good in RTA anywhere else. Arena defense, you could place him on, but I've never seen one in an arena defense, and I don't think it would do too crazy. We have the Wind Megami, which is the one with giving the Invis. So invisibility makes it where in arena offense you can nuke something like an Alexandra and not care about it, or Lydia and not care about it. Those are some niche mechanics, but is it really that great at the moment? It's not really a necessity. Also, Katarina kind of styles are not really that great at the moment. So he's interesting, but he's not performing it that well. So I'm just gonna give that a simple 70. It's like a misstep, but a little bit more in my opinion. So 70 for the Wind Megami. Then we have the Water Gojo. I feel like Water Gojo simply does too little at the moment. He's an okay-ish for a strip, but his passive just doesn't add him enough turns. Plus what Gojos all need, especially the Gojos that are on defense scaling, they need their skill 1 to be defense, especially for one that doesn't have a skill 3. In the sense of the wind one, at least he has a skill 3, so you don't do a skill 1 too often. While you only have skill 1 and skill 2, you're pretty much always, you're just doing way too many skill 1s, which are low value. If you're not defense scaling well, you're defense type. So I think I'm even gonna like Water Gojo on 60. Fire Gojo is like a Theomars-ish, but his passive is kind of easy to overtake as well. And it's also like the point where it's like, oh, why would you take a Gojo over Theomars against the Leo? That's kind of it. And then why against the Leo? Because the speed scaling matters less on the Gojo. But that's, yeah, just a 70 for that one. Set-wise, just, well, also Theo style. Simple as that. Then we have the Vincent, which is also the Wind Gojo. And I think for RTA, he's actually slightly underrated. For RTA, he might be... I wouldn't be surprised that if in the next balance patch, Cigar gets slightly nerfed, Wind Gojo gets slightly buffed, and he will overtake the Cigar spot. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But right now, I think that he's underrated for RTA. He has the AoE Provoke. He has an AoE Strip on the S2, so there's a lot of stuff going on the S2 and S3. It's just the S1, once again, he's a def type, and he's... Yeah, S1 is attack type scaling, so that doesn't help anything. But RTA-wise, he might be pretty interesting. And both for him is probably just speed HP defense or speed defense defense or speed HP accuracy or anything along those lines. Just to get his skills in. And I think he has a bit of a better base stats. Yeah, that's also a thing. He has a 106 base, whereas a Cigar that you're trying to get like faster than most of your units at a 98 base. That is an 8 base difference. That is a lot and a lot of speed difference. So making this thing as your strip, sure, I don't like it like the 2 to 3 times. But if you have this as like your side stripper plus then also the provoke for 2 turns, issue is that this kind of has to land on all elements. If this were to land on fire as well, this thing would absolutely be insane. But that's kind of more like a wishful thinking rather than it is the current state of right now. But I think he is underrated. He's definitely a nice unit, so I'm going to give that 80 to the Wind Gojo for that one. Then we go into the scenarios of units that are pretty much never used, but I do actually kind of want to double check what they currently do. This one was the threat state, yes, and then proportional damage. Oh, this is the silent threat state one, yep. I think he is okay-ish niche, but he's not really used that much. The Wind or the Water Draken Warriors, Solvark was his name, right? Yep. Fire one is pretty much garbage. It's super fun because this skill can give you like infinite turns in the Wind Rift Beast, but that is legit the only thing he does. Besides that, he's just straight up trash. He doesn't deal enough damage. He's not going to do anything. I think he's legit on this level. So we're going to put a Daragon on that. And then we have for the final one, Ashion, and Ashion is the strip, and in the strip that also does more damage on harmful effects proportional to your defense. Yeah, also once again we have defense scaling, attack scaling. That's just garbage. That's just not enough, but also just waiting for a buff. But let's place him over there. Then let's first do the units that I haven't done over here at the bottom. So GingerBrave, I think for just a RTA unit, but you're not really going to be using it that much. You can use the speed contester, but most of the time his skill 1 is inconsistent, skill 2 is a bit inconsistent, so just gonna give that a 60. Just a speed unit. For the Homunculus, I would say the Water Homunculus is just good in TOA, but you have a lot of replacements for TOA, so I'm just gonna give that a 70 for the TOA, but I think this thing is definitely overvalued by people. It's like, oh, I had this all the way back in the days for TOA. There's so many good TOA units right now. You don't need this for TOA. Fire Homunculus is just a damage nuker, but it's not really something that you would like to go for. Wind Homunculus, however, I definitely do give a lot of credit to. Wind Homunculus is 85 for me because it is the dungeon that we all farm the most, which is Giants. I think like legit everyone farms Giants the most nowadays. It is a best in slot in Giants to make it safe. And safe runs, especially if you don't have infinite crystals, which most of us don't, safe runs have more value than super fast runs. And he is the thing that makes all of the runs super fast, so he's very unique and a best in slot for that reason. And I definitely like I could run my Giants faster if I weren't to go for a Tesha with an Homunculus style. If I could go for a If I went for a Mephisto plus a Julie style, it would be faster. But since I go for the Tesher with the Homunculus, it's a lot safer. It almost never fails. And I'd rather have that than like 2 seconds faster of the Mephisto style. So therefore, I give a lot of value to the Wind Homunculus. Then we have the Ken. And Ken is a best-in slot in R5. Arguably used a lot in SF. And you can use it in RTA as well as a Leo counter. So it is kind of like the Leo counters that we see over here, but a little bit better because he has some PvE uses as well. I would say for R5, he's kind of the must in the specific team that I'm using. In SF, I would say his spot is taken over by the Igar, because the Igar also has a buff block, and this thing doesn't have a buff block. Like, sure, he has nice damage, but no buff block, so he's a little bit worse. So Ken gets a 75 for that. If you want to use him in RTA, it's a double Nem Will or something along those lines. Then we go into the Spectre Princesses, and I would say Wind one is the most horrible one. That's just the one that is like a full-on tank, but it is a full-on tank that doesn't have an S2 that is related to a tank. If she had the other S2 with the Sacrifice, it would be a lot better, but right now I think she's really bad, so I'm just going to give it like, let's say 55. Wait, that was the previous one. Fire one is the one that has a lot of absorbs. It is not bad for RTA, but I wouldn't really like to use it that much myself. Also, I think where a lot of it is like HP scaling. Oh no, wait, this skill's not even HP scaling. So S2 is HP scaling, S3 is attack scaling, and S1 is attack scaling. It's too much scaling all over the place. I don't really like it, so I'm just gonna give that like, I think it could be used, but it's more niche than actually really good. I'm gonna give that a 70. Build-wise, probably some speed, HP, or speed, high accuracy, whatever style. Lamia is a little bit more interesting because of the sacrifice skill. Third skill is also not bad for the provoke branding and then also max HP. So there's max HP and max HP. And then, unfortunately, not max HP. So if she had triple max HP, she would be really nice. Would be insane for the dark one maybe. But then again, that could be an easy buff. So, but I think she has some more potential in that. So I'm going to give her a 80. I would say it's mainly an RTA unit, but I could see her being used as a Siege Bruiser unit as well. Keep in mind that her damage comes from, on the S2, from how much HP she has. So she's like a Skogul. The more HP you have, the more damage you do. You don't care about crit rate, no crit damage or attack or anything, just plain HP damage. So for Siege, I could see her being used. And for RTA, she has some usages in here and there as well. So I'm going to give that an... Now, let's say it's 75. No, I would say an 80. I think she's kind of underrated. I think she's pretty nice. But PV anywhere, not useful. Then we go into the new units for Demon Slayer. So let's start off with the most horrible one. I think this thing is legit. The Fire Inosuke is really bad. Inosuke has the big issue where skill 1 and skill 2 pretty low on value. If you add in a passive that doesn't add that much to itself as well, you're just become like a really bad unit. I think it's a little bit better than these, but it's really bad. Then I did do a video before on the Water Inosuke. A lot of people did high value this one because of the speed lead and the AoE strip. But it is like a Chiwu, but in my opinion, a Chiwu that's worse than a Chiwu. And why is it worse than a Chiwu? Chiwu is really good against the Camilla comps where Chiwu will completely aggro all of the attention of the Camilla. If you use this thing, the Camilla could start hitting your other unit. It could start hitting your Poseidon or your Leia or whatever. And it's not that great. Plus, he takes an additional turn after his skill 3 to do what? Single target armor break or a stun? It's not enough. It's not enough. Sure, he has the higher lead than the Chiwu, but I think Chiwu is better than this unit because simply his S1 and S2 don't add too much value. If he were to get a better S1 and S2, he would be pretty decent. Okay, and then about the... let's go Nezuko's first. So, Nezuko on water. I would say it's a little bit more of a guesstimate rather than... I actually tested her already. This is the one that goes for the triple roundhouse kick the moment she gets hit, right? If you get turned while you have shields. Okay, so you first need a shield. So you're not sure if that works with shield runes. Can see some use for her. Oh, wait for some... did I get bugged? Oh, since I have a few left, they drag up with me. Never seen that before. Nice. That's actually not bad. But yeah, I think she might be okay-ish for siege offense slash... Arena defense? No, it's just siege offense and RTA a little bit. But It's more of an estimation that I think she might be okay rather than that I feel like she's actually good and okay. The fire one is having the big issue where you kind of want to have multi-hits on this. Because if this misses, it's not that great. So yeah, it's just a little bit on that. And the activation rate isn't full on. So she's just missing a little bit of like, if she had multi-hits on the S3 and a higher activation on the S2, she would be really nice. Now she feels on fire a little bit more niche. So I'm going to put her 75 as well. Then we have the Tanjiros. And let's start off with Tanjiro Fire. Tanjiro Fire, Tanjiro Fire, Tanjiro Fire. This is the one that absorbs attack bar. Okay, and then it has the nuke on the S2. It's not bad. Wait, is that the nuke on the S2? Yeah, that is the ignore defense on the S2. Okay. It's not the worst, but it's hard for me to say that I'm actually liking him. I think for Siege offense has some usage. Also has multiplier where a Claire S2, for example, has 350 multiplier. The multiplier on this one I checked before was a 320, so that's lower, and he has lower base stats. So yeah, making it like a nuke like we did with Claire, whereas Claire even had Claire's at 75. I feel like it's kind of, whoops, not you. I feel like it's kind of same-ish, but a little bit worse. Okay, this thing starts bugging me out. 75-ish for like a little bit of usage everywhere, but never really super crazy great. That's my opinion on it. Then we have the wind one. Obama did start showcasing this one. It is nice for stunning, granting immunity on yourself, and then increasing your attack power. It is nice, but the big issue is if this was light and dark, or light or dark, you wouldn't have issues with elements. Since this thing, you need to sack to make this thing work good against fire. That is the biggest issue. Sure, he has this S2 that has decent damage, but once again, multiplier isn't crazy high. So I would say that he has the big issue of being the wrong element, that into fire, this stuff is just simply not going to be landing that often. And if you're landing it all the time, you're just sacking. But it's not a bad unit per se. I can see the use of it, like overall, more of a bruiser-ish unit kind of style, a little bit decent. But is it really crazy good? Not sure. I'll give that an 80. Then we have the Zenitsus, and then we're also done with the list. Let's see, Zenitsus, I have to go for the other element, otherwise we don't have 5s. Let's start off with the water one. Water one is the passive, because they all have kind of the same styles, just the passive different. Increase your attack bar when you attack an enemy under inability effects. Would say is not bad per se, but it's also not crazy good. Skill 4 could use a little bit more damage to be nice, I would say. Skill 1 is really nice. Only issue is that he's just a 75 chance to armor break. If he had a higher chance to armor break, would have definitely been nice. But definitely not a bad unit. Once again, it's also more of an estimation of how good he is rather than me knowing how good he is, because I don't really think it's like a defense unit, so it's more of like an offense unit for Arena or RTA. Or, well, Siege and RTA. So I kind of give that an... wait, where the hell did you come from? You came from all the way down there. Okay, this thing starts to bug me out a lot. Wait, where did the Inosuke go? Wait, the Inosuke went... Where's the Zenitsu? Oh, there. Okay, so let's go over there for you. Where's Chiwu? Oh, wait, where's Chiwu was in this rank? Man, this thing is bugging all over the place with me selecting. I can select back in this list, which just makes things weird. But yeah, for this one, I think that he's the best one out of all of them. I think he is at a 90, but I might be overrating it here. I think he's good for Siege offense. He's good for RTA. But not really crazy anywhere else. I'm gonna give it 85 for now. Because I've seen people really hyping this one up. Which is the one that has the passive where he recovers HP. But it's only a 4-time cooldown. And it is possible to get the cooldown down fast enough where he gets into that state multiple times. So he might be really good because of that, but I would have to properly test him. So I would say all of the Demon Slayers are a little bit more of a estimation than I think that they're actually really crazy. But yeah, I think that this is going to be the list. I think I didn't forget any unit. I hope I didn't, otherwise let me know in the comments. But yeah, this is all of the list. I don't feel like changing anything right now. List is definitely long enough. And last time around, I made a video of 1 hour and 45. Now with a few edits, I'm probably going to be looking at like 2 hours and 20 minutes or something like that. So which is definitely a little bit longer, but we also have a few more units added to the pile. Once again, keep in mind that even units that's being around 65 or 60, If you put them in the right team, invest the good runes to it, they will probably shine. But units all the way at the top, they will shine a lot more. Simple as that, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like this video and subscribe to the channel. I highly appreciate that. I will also be doing this for full LDs, all of the LD4s, all of the normal elementals on the net force, also all of the 2As. And then I'm also going to be making a tier list of my most wanted LD5. So LD5s rated by most wanted for me. So those are going to be the tier lists that are coming. That's definitely a lot of work. So for that reason, I do highly appreciate it if you like this video, subscribe to the channel. Guys, thanks a lot for watching and see you later. Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab for the guide video archive, which contains all of the guides that you might need. Hope to see you there.